Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. Thank you, Chase. Good morning. Thank you. Welcome to the 4th Annual Transfer Summit between Salt Lake Community College and the University of Utah. My name is Jason Taylor. I'm an assistant dean in undergraduate studies and leading our transfer student success office. I'm also an associate professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy. So welcome. I'm going to take a moment and offer a land acknowledgement as we gather here at the University of Utah. We acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshuti, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm that the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community activities. So welcome to you all. When we planned this event, we were strategic about a late March date where we could join together and see the sunshine, step outside and get some warm air and spend time together. And I think the weather had different plans for us. But here we are. We're delighted to see such a strong turnout in person and welcome many of you who are joining us virtually as we live stream a few sessions. So as I mentioned, this is the 4th annual summit. Our first summit was in 2019, and we had 2 virtual events in 2020 and 2021. So we're really excited to be back together again, in part in the spirit in which this event was first designed. And so I want to welcome all of our friends and colleagues from Salt Lake Community College. Thank you for coming to the University of Utah. And thanks to all of our University of Utah colleagues across campus, many departments across campus who are joining us for this important conversation and summit. So the planning and organization of this event is really a collaboration and partnership between SLCC and the U. So I want to just ask my colleague from SLCC, the director of the University Transfer and Articulation Office, Leilani Clegg, to stand and please be recognized. Thanks, Leilani. We've been working on this event for months, and it really is has taken both of our teams to pull it off. And so in that spirit, let me just thank a few other people from both of our teams who were critical to today's event. From SLCC, Nicole Stout, Rachel Lewis, and of course, Leilani Clegg. From the U, Liz Butler, Ann Dibble, Karen Paisley, Chase Haygood, our transfer student employees and team in our Office of Transfer Student Success who have really coordinated a lot of the logistics, Emily Hernandez, Teju Gouda, and really 2 people I want to thank tremendously in our office, Paul Fisk and Daniel Rodriguez. Are they? Yeah, right over here. Paul and Daniel, please stand, you two. Really, they all did the work to bring us together today. So thank you, Daniel and Paul. Before we get into our keynote, I just want to take a minute to talk about what brings us together each year for this event and sort of why we're here. Why did we ask you? I sort of wanted to work from home this morning. This was like the perfect Friday morning where you snowing, you could have just stayed in your house, worked from home in your pajamas. So thank you for coming. But why are we here? So a few years ago, our presidents and top academic leaders from both institutions, they had a series of deliberate conversations and decided we needed to strengthen our partnership in more strategic ways, building from many, many years of efforts between both departments at both institutions, and they committed more resources to transfer efforts. They launched this annual transfer summit, and they challenged us to be more deliberate and intentional in our partnership. So there's sort of 3 core purposes for our annual summit. First, to really acknowledge and celebrate the importance and value of our institutional partnership. We're doing a lot of work across multiple divisions at both institutions, and we see that centrally and continue to see examples of that across both institutions. Two, we want to educate our campus communities about our collaboration and partnership. We need to make sure we know what's going on. We need to increase awareness about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then three, we really want to we've made a lot of progress and continue to do good work, but we need to identify ways to better serve our transfer students who move between our two institutions. So those are sort of the three guiding purposes for our meeting, and we tried to design an agenda around those. So you all have the agenda in front of you, and those of you online should have access to the agenda. We probably should have started with our students, but the real experts who we're going to hear from today are our transfer students. So we are, and our prospective transfer students. So we are really excited to have an outstanding panel of students that we're going to hear from about their experiences. We've got a fantastic keynote who I'll introduce momentarily, our presidents, and then our academic leadership. And our last session of the day after lunch is focused on articulation agreements and transfer pathways, and really sort of intended for those folks in academic affairs or advising who are working in that space. And so others are welcome to stay and learn and listen, but also understand if you'd like to enjoy your Friday afternoon. Maybe the sun will come out by that time. So I'm clicking something. There we go. And then as we move through the day, I'd like to sort of just draw some inspiration from a recent conference that our team went to, the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students in Portland, where incidentally at that meeting, we were in Portland and I think we got 8 inches of snow and Portland shut down, a few of us. So here we are again. The theme was be a connector for transfer students. So be a connector for transfer students. And the conference, organizers noted, they sort of defined a connector as a person who goes out of their way to introduce you to someone or something new and has shifted your perspective to help you reach your goals. And sort of, I think, as we reflect on that, we can all sort of think about someone who's been a connector in our life. And in the context of transfer, connectors, they say connectors go beyond quick referrals and instead take the time to validate students' strengths and needs, map action steps to outcomes, and suggest meaningful and timely resources. And I think we can all think about, the connectors in the context of our direct work with transfer students. I look around the room, see a lot of you who I know are connectors. I also think it's important for us to think about our professional roles and how we connect between institutions as colleagues and within our institution, within our divisions, within our institution. So it's important for us to connect because transfer students are really relying on us to connect our systems as they're navigating two completely different institutional contexts and systems. So with that, I hope you hear some common themes this morning and into the afternoon. And after the event, we'll send out an evaluation and just encourage you to share ideas, feedback that you hear and things that you would like to share with us. So before I introduce our keynote, just a couple logistics. For those live streaming, we are going to extend the live stream for the first 3 sessions. So the keynote, the presidents, and then the students. And we're recording the whole event today, so we'll post it online within the next week or two. So with that, I'm delighted to really introduce our keynote speaker today, Mr. Alfred Herrera, who's joining us from UCLA and bravely left the warm California weather to join us on this spring day in Salt Lake City. So as Assistant Dean for Academic Partnerships and the Director of the UCLA Center for Community College Partnerships, or CCCP, Alfred Herrera has devoted over 40 years at UCLA focused on helping transfer students achieve their educational goals. His work at the center focuses on developing academic enrichment programs focused on preparing underserved students to become competitively eligible for a research university. He is nationally and internationally renowned for his strong advocacy on behalf of transfer and undocumented students within higher education. He's conducted training and information sessions about supporting undocumented students across the country and improving access and success of transfer students. He's also responsible for developing and implementing innovative summer academic residential programs to motivate, empower, and guide students through their transfer pathway. Alfred and his CCCP team were recently selected in 2019 by Excellencia in Education as the model program across the nation in serving Latino students to advance higher education. And he's a co-author of a recent book on transfer called The Power to Transfer: Critical Race Theory and a Transfer Receptive Culture. Personally, I've known Alfred for several years as we've connected at NISTS and some other conferences. And I think we are truly fortunate to have one of a handful of leaders, I think, in higher education in this country who have dedicated and committed their professional careers and lives to opportunities and creating new opportunities for transfer students. So we are delighted to welcome you to the stage and learn from your work. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Herrera.
Good morning. Let me turn on my timer here to remind myself, because I could go on forever. I'm really excited to be here on this sunny spring day in Utah. As I was invited a while back, I thought, oh, it'll be nice. And it is nice. I sent pictures this morning to a lot of my team and others saying, look at the sun. Isn't it beautiful? These flowers are just gorgeous. And someone responded saying, flowers? I don't see flowers. And I said, oh, the white things on top of the tree are flowers. But it is beautiful. And as I was landing yesterday when I came in, to see the mountains covered in snow was just amazing, because we have a lot of snow outside of LA, but in LA we don't. And when I left, it had just, I think 2 days of rain had passed. So I left, it was not dry, but not raining. And then it was going to start raining again. So to come here into the snow is kind of a progression. So we'll see what happens when I get back, if I get back. We were in Portland. I did get stuck there from the snow, spent 2 extra days in Portland, which meant several trips to Powell's bookstore to buy books that you don't need, but have to have. And when you walk into a place and say, I'm only going to buy 2 books or 3 books, and you walk out with a truckload of them, it's a problem. But anyway, I am excited to be here. And for me, it's about students. It's about the students and the work that we do, and why it's so important for us to think about this work intentionally, and even more importantly, intrusively, because it's something that is really critical as we work through helping students, guide students through the process, that we work with first-gen, low-income, underrepresented students, and knowing how important that is to help guide them is really critical. I wanted to thank you for doing the land acknowledgement, but first I want to thank the team. Everybody that's been a part of this has been really, really critical. I know what it's like to do a conference, and it's a lot of moving pieces. And so to do it and do it well, like it's showing up here, is really great. And thank you for braving the storm to come here. I told Jason last night, in person, online, or next week is fine. Whatever works for us, we'll do. And so I'm really excited to do that. So about the land acknowledgement, you've already done it, but I wanted to say a couple of things beyond that. It is important to understand the longstanding history that has brought us to reside on the land, and to understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonization is current, ongoing process. And we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. We must recognize that we sit on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. We should honor our opportunity to live wherever we live, and to acknowledge and honor the people that came before us and who are still here. Although land acknowledgements are powerful statements, they are only meaningful when they are coupled with authentic and sustained relationships with Indigenous communities and community-informed actions. Something that I tell my students every summer in the program that I run, which is an academic residential summer program I'll talk about in a minute, is about knowing your history. This is one of my favorite quotes from a woman that I had the fortune of meeting way, way back in my early career. And she said this, and it really inspired me to think about what is it that we need to know about who we are and where we come from. I don't think anybody anywhere can talk about the future of their people or of an organization without talking about education. Those who control the education of our children control our future. And I tell our students that it's important to know your history, number one. But beyond that, you need to teach that history, because whoever teaches that history teaches whatever version of history they write. And so it is important. And so I start out our summer programs every year telling our students how important it is to, one, know your history, and two, teach it. So today is Cesar Chavez Day. It is an acknowledgement, it's his birthday. It's an acknowledgement of his work, lifelong work in social justice and equity. Today, I'd like to honor and acknowledge the life and impact of a man who fought for social justice and equity his entire life. His life should be an example of what one person can do to ensure that we all have opportunities and live our best life. Today is a holiday in California, so I'm actually on holiday. And the University of California is closed today in honor of Cesar. I am pleased to be able to be here on this day, providing the information on ways that you can provide these opportunities for all the students you serve, particularly those who come from first-generation low-income and underrepresented communities. Today, I honor Cesar Chavez. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. I'm a fourth-generation California. My dad's great-great-grandfather came from Mexico, from Hermosillo, Mexico in 1847, and lived in a lived in a place outside of downtown LA, about 35 miles from downtown Los Angeles, ended up founding this town called Irwindale, was one of the founding families. And so we have a long history in that area. I'm a fourth-generation Californian. I'm a Chicano, or Mexican-American. First-generation students, the fifth first-generation student, the fifth of 6 children, come from a low-income family. My father worked in asphalt, laying all that asphalt on the streets. And my mother was a housekeeper, or maid, as we called it in that day. And she raised children from other families. And we used to joke because she was always at work and never at home with us because she had to work. So we always used to say that my mother had 2 families. And we were jealous because they got her during the day. And so, but it was growing up in that kind of an environment that made me understand what it is to be a working class person. My father took me to work to his work when I was 13. So imagine this little chubby kid going to work at 4:30 in the morning to get up to go do some work on asphalt. I had the glorious task of shoveling the asphalt and concrete that they chopped up into a wheelbarrow and then taking it in the wheelbarrow to the truck. Unfortunately, after 1 or 2 trips, I was done. I said to my father, I don't feel well. And he said, I'm sorry to hear that, in different terms, but said, keep working. My mother made us lunch. We had lunch and I kept thinking, when's the day gonna end? At 4 o'clock, we go home. Now, I was a chubby kid and, we eat. Well, I went home and went to bed, didn't eat, didn't do anything. And I slept until the next morning at 4:30 when my father woke me up. And I said, I'm not gonna go because I don't really feel well at all. And he laughed and said, get in the shower. You're gonna go to work for 3 days. And I realized at that point that I was not made to do that kind of work. And that's when I believe that the engine started in my head about what you're doing and why you need to get an education. I asked him afterwards, did you do that intentionally? He said, no, he just was trying to make a man out of me. And I said, well, I'm a different kind of a man, Dad. So wanted to mention a couple of things that I think are critical as we think about what's going on in our educational system now and the disparities and what's happened to us over the with COVID. Incredibly life-changing for the work that we do when you are a front-facing, face-to-face kind of a program and you get stopped and try to figure out how are you going to do the work that you do online. The first reaction is we can't do it. We just can't do it. There's just no way we can do it. And when we start to figure out how to do that with the students that we work with, we found out that there were lots of different challenges. We all know about the realities that some of our students deal with. We all know about the fact that some of our students live with 2 or 3 families in their home so they can afford the home. We all know all kinds of things, but the pandemic blew the doors open in a way that we were not prepared for. And when you see students in a bathroom having to take a class on a phone because they have no computer at home, or there's 4 children in school and 1 computer, you got to figure out how are we doing these kinds of things. And then we're asking them to get online more and do this work. So we had to rethink some of the things. What we ended up finding out was, as you can see, I'm not going to read it, but we had some challenges with enrollment. Students that some of their families lost their jobs, so they had to go to work. They couldn't go to school, or they would enroll in 1 class and maybe not even finish it because they had to go to work. Looking at the drop in enrollment, some of our community colleges are still struggling with that, in the fact that last fall, and we're never beyond the pandemic, we'll always be a part of it, right? But we're in a place that's different from where we were. I was talking to a couple of the presidents a couple of weeks ago, and we had a meeting. They anticipated 60% of their students would enroll back in person on their campuses. 60% of them did enroll online. And they had challenges because they were preparing for a full slot of students to come through that never made it. So trying to figure out how do we do that and how do we increase our enrollment during these trying and troubling times is really important. So let me tell you a little bit about CCP and my journey. So I started at UCLA, as Jason said. It is now in 2 months, it will be 42 years ago. So I started in undergraduate admissions. I was hired to be a recruiter. So I went out and told students all these wonderful things about UCLA and why they should be there, and on and on and on. And my very first season of that, I found out that freshman students were not my favorite. I was a direct entry student. I went from high school to to a university. But when I'm standing there in front of a table and you have 150 people waiting to talk to you because UCLA is always popular, and there's 4 people right in line in front of you, and this person asks you a question about the average GPA and SAT, and you say it, and then the person next to him, who has been standing there for the whole answer, asks the same question, and 4 people down ask the same question. I thought, I wanted to say, well, you can imagine what I wanted to say. What I did say was I responded politely and said the same thing over and over and over 665,000 times that night. I realized that's not how I wanted to spend my work. And I had worked with transfer students and realized that they were more complex, they were more interesting, there was more life story and more reason why I wanted to do that. So early on in my career in admissions, I built a community college transfer recruitment team. And we worked on really trying to focus on helping students at the university or get into the university. I spent 16 years at UCLA, 18 years at UCLA in admissions. And then we had something called Proposition 209. I'm not sure if anybody knows about Proposition 209. The short thing is it was the anti-affirmative action law that went into place that said you cannot use race, gender, ethnicity in your selection and so on and so forth. And at the same time, the regents were saying, we want to increase diversity. So the legislature gave money to do programming. Our vice chancellor decided we could do it in transfer. So he bought my time out of admissions. And for 2 years, I worked in the chancellor's office at UCLA, developing an outreach strategy to increase diversity at the transfer level. Part of that, and part of my agreement for doing that was so that I could build a center that I knew was important, and I could build summer programs that I knew were really critical in helping students get into the university. So in 2001, I founded the UCLA Center for Community College Partnerships. The best part of doing that is I got to create the center and the mission, and I got to create my own job description. And the beauty of that is I knew what I wanted to do, and the vice chancellor allowed me to do that. So we created the center focused on increasing access and opportunities for students who are first-gen low income and underrepresented. We focused on trying to figure out, how do you help students get through the community college before they start and while they're there, so it doesn't become a revolving door. Because one of the things that we found is students go in, they spend a semester or 2 or 3 or 4, and they leave without a degree, without a number of credits that transfer, and so on and so forth. So we felt like if we could build these programs that would help students understand that at the front end, we might have a better chance at the back end in terms of students getting out. And it has worked. So the focus is on developing partnerships with efforts at 3 different levels: the students, the faculty and staff, and the administration. Our goal is to motivate and inform and prepare students for a research university. I'm not there to recruit for UCLA. I'm not there to tell students you need to be at UCLA. I'm there to tell students you need to transfer. You need to transfer somewhere. And if that somewhere is UCLA, great, we want you there. But if that somewhere is elsewhere in the city or the state, we'll help you get there. It's really about empowering students to take ownership of their education and make sure they know what they need to do in order to get there. So we work on that level, and we provide opportunities for students to excel. The components of the program that I run is the scholars program. So we call our students scholars because they don't consider themselves scholars. Most people don't consider first-gen low-income students anything but at-risk students, which is a term that I absolutely hate. But we call them scholars because we want them to feel empowered and to know that they have what it takes. We have a peer advising component. We have academic summer programs, some residential, some not. We do webinars. We have training for counselors and faculty. And we do a lot of discipline dialogues between faculty at institutions. And I'll talk a minute about that. So our peer advising, let me tell you about our team. So right now, and I was telling the group last night, I've been fortunate enough to get some additional funding. We are partnering with several HSI institutions on some grants that they wrote, and so we got additional funding. I now, as of 2 weeks ago, have 18 staff that work in my office focused on transfer. And that's huge because we went from 10 to 18 in a matter of months. And the job that we do is focused on the schools that we work. So to give you some context, there are 116 community colleges in California. There are 21 community colleges in LA County alone. LA County is supposed to be our service area where we work with students from those schools. Of those 21, we have intense partnerships with 12 of them, which means that we have a full-time staff member and certain number, anywhere from 2 to 4 or 6 peer advisors who go to that campus and spend the week there or 3 days there or so on and so forth. The intention is to really flood the campus with UCLA information about transfer to a university. And we do workshops, we do webinars, we bring students to campus and a whole bunch of other stuff. I have 88 students who are UCLA students that are peer advisors. We changed the name 2 years ago from peer mentor. Who can guess why? Okay, I'll tell you. Because we wanted to be inclusive. Mentor, men, femtor, femme, advisor, kind of generic in that sense, but it honors those who have different identities, and wanted to change that. So our students came up with that term. So I have 88 students who are peer advisors, and that in itself is a challenge, trying to coordinate and organize and so forth. But this is what the center is about. It's focused on really trying to change the landscape of transfer at the community college for students so that they understand that there are possibilities. The students who work for us are students who were at that community college 1, 2, 3 years ago, who were doing the same kinds of things that that student is, who had the same class that that student is sitting in at this moment. So really understanding what it's like from a student perspective. I could talk about transfer all day, but I'm old. So students are like, sure, you're an administrator. But when a student talks with them, and you'll hear from the student panel, it's real. It makes it like, I can get there. I can be that person. So we use the students because they are the most impactful in all the work that we do. And it is great work. Our discipline dialogues, imagine this. English faculty at UCLA talking to English faculty in community colleges. Something that's just kind of a natural thing, right? No, doesn't happen. It was very interesting when we started doing that at how little our faculty knew about community colleges. It was really interesting for them because, you know, we get the elite students who get to UCLA into these courses. So having them hear from English faculty that say, I'm teaching at all of these different levels and so on and so forth was kind of eye-opening. So to have the conversations about pedagogy, to have the conversations about curriculum and what you teach and so on and so forth is really important. And those we do in STEM, and those we do in humanities and social sciences, really important for the work that that we've been doing in really helping guide some of the conversations that we have in terms of programming for partnerships, being intrusive and being intentional. One of the things that we learned, and it's a shameless plug for the book, one of the things that we learned is the work that we were doing was really important. And it wasn't my thing. My thing is, I'm a doer. Let's do this. I hired a graduate student many years ago, now probably 14 or so years ago, by the name of Dimple Jan. Dimple was my graduate student who pestered me, and I'll say this so she could hear, pestered me to hire her to work in the center because she wanted to do that work. And I had never had a graduate student working with us. I hired her and the entire thing changed. Every other word from her mouth came out as publish, write. So we did. We wrote. In 2011, we did our first piece called The Transfer Receptive Culture, introducing a transfer receptive culture, and 5 or 6 articles later, we came out with the book in 2019. And it really is about the work that we've been doing in the center and the work that so many other universities is doing, focused on increasing access and opportunities for students through the kind of work that we do. There's something called a transfer sending culture, and I'm not going to go into this much, but basically it's about the intentionality of being at a community college and sending students to transfer. Community colleges have multiple missions. This is not the only thing they do, but this should be one of the important things that happens at that institution. And it depends on the entire campus for that to happen. It is not the responsibility of an office called the Transfer Center to make it happen. It is the responsibility of faculty, of staff, administrators to make that happen. Same thing as we developed the transfer receptive culture, really critical for us to look at. My thing was, so we're asking all these students to come to UCLA, what are we offering them? Why should they think about our campus? What is important? What do we have to offer them? And you know, when we first started this, we didn't have much. How could we offer students, encourage them to come when we wouldn't even guarantee them housing, but we guaranteed freshmen? How could we encourage students to come who were parents, but we didn't have any childcare? We didn't have any priority registration. You know, parents have things that they need to attend to with their children. So when you're in a class, you need to get to your car quickly if something comes up. They don't even have parking. So all of those kinds of things that we began to look at, what do we need to do at our institution? And are we intentional about the work that we're doing? And is it important enough for students to see that? Number one, what are our faculty doing? How are our faculty engaged in this conversation? I always talk about how, you know, if you're a community college student and you walk into a classroom and you're a first-gen student and a faculty member puts on the board, where are you transferring? First thing they say, can you imagine the impact that that has on a student? Thinking, wow, somebody is thinking about my future. Imagine after a few times they see that, they begin to think about those things. And imagine coming into the university and seeing faculty who say, I transferred from Salt Lake Community College, and wear it proudly. Imagine that transfer pride that is so critical to our students in seeing their stories that are also critical. The transfer receptive culture basically is an intention of making sure that the services provided at the university welcome and embrace the student experience. Transfer students come from a variety of places. They're not the same. There are the non-traditional, which are more traditional now than they are non. There are the students who come with families. There are the students who are just the first gen and so on. Trying to remember how important it is for us to work through those identities and make sure that we provide the support services is really critical. The theoretical framework that we base all of this on is critical race theory, how race and racism intersect with the daily lives of our students and why it's important to own it, why it's important to know it. When we first started doing this, we're fortunate to have Danny Solorzano, who's a professor in the School of Education and kind of the father of CRT and education, as a mentor. And when he first started talking to me about this 15 years or so ago, I'm like, I don't know, this is really heavy. You know, this is like stuff that you don't want to just say, oh, here you go, CRT, blah, 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 and then you walk away. And I'm like, you know, we have to be trained, we have to do this. He says, let's do it. Let me show you. He did it and they got it. And they got it because they lived it. They lived it and they understood it because they realized this is what it's called, what's happening to me, what's happened to me, and this is how we work through and around it. And that's why it's important for them to understand it so they know how to work through it, so they know how to move forward with it. And so we've been using the foundation of CRT in our work for a long time. The tenets that we came up with are similar to the tenets in CRT, and I'm going to go through this really quickly because I'm sure I'm getting down to the wire, right? The 5 tenets that we identified had to do with pre and post transfer. So what we really wanted to do is we wanted to talk about those things that were important before students came to a university and those students that happened during that and then when they got to the university. But we realized that it's not a before and an after, it's a during and a through. And so we began to look at these. And one of them, of course, is institutional priority. What is the institutional priority? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Outreach and resources. In the old days, and I know the old days because I lived them, we used to do, I remember when they used to put together these brochures and they would just take the picture off and put another picture and then take freshman off and put transfer and then think it was, you know, appropriate. And we're like, nah, it's not going to work. So being intentional about the outreach and the resources that you provide and how important they are to the students that you're trying to work with. So that's always been an important thing. Looking at the support services, what are you providing for students? As I said, you know, we have parenting students. Do you have a parenting center? Students with dependent center? Do you have somewhere for them to go? You have a lot of commuters there. Do you have a computer lounge? What are your students going to do if they have a class at 9 o'clock in the morning and a class at 4 o'clock, but they can't leave campus because it's too far to get to wherever it is? Where are they going? You just throw them into the library and think that they're going to be okay? Do you have a commuter center? Do you have a place for them to go to? We now have at UCLA a commuter hub. And there are little pods where students can go in and pretend that they're part of this future and they fall asleep for a little while and do all that stuff. I was amazed when I went in there a few months ago and I was thinking, wow, this is really cool. It's kind of like little bedroom kind of things that, anyway, but it's intended to get the student away from into a place where they can actually relax a little bit, do some work that they need to do and so on. And then looking at research and assessment. You know, we always talk about that, how important it is for us to look at what we're doing, to assess what we're doing, and to make sure that we're doing the right things. So as we work through this, we wanted to make sure that we also looked at community cultural wealth. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but Tara Yoso is a professor. Fortunately for me, she was a student at UCLA way back when, and I actually knew her as a student. She is now a professor and has coined something called community cultural wealth, which is basically it's what we bring to us from our own culture, from our own background, from our own upbringing to the university that the university sometimes tries to strip away. The whole cultural piece of all those norms and things that we learn from our families that build strength in us, give us inner strength, are really important. So we teach that to our students, and I've been fortunate enough to have her come and talk to our students about this because we believe it is so critical and so important for students to understand that. And then we talked about partnerships and how important they are, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but the most important thing is to make sure that they're intentional. They have to be intentional. They have to have an outcome that is seen as a benefit for both. In our case, I was talking to presidents of community colleges, and they were saying, what's in it for us? What's in it for you is your students can transfer to the university. What's in it for us is that we can receive the students. So walking in as what I call a critical friend, meaning you don't walk in there and say, you're not transferring any students to us and, you know, blah, 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 but saying you're not transferring any students to us and we're not taking the students that do want to transfer. How are we going to get to that middle ground and really try to figure out what's best? Looking at what you have, looking at what we have, figuring out where we come to this commonality of that is really the important part. What do we need to do to help you provide the services, and what should we be doing to make sure that we have the services on our campus that are really important? So the intentionality of it, and more importantly, the intrusiveness of it, you know, you got to push the needle. There are people that just kind of want to do whatever they want to do, and yet they should do more or different. And I think part of that is faculty. I was amazed at how many faculty were really interested in this transfer conversation when we held a town hall at one of our community colleges, and they came in and said, what can we do? What can we do to help? And I said, write up transfer on your chalkboard every day, or used to be chalkboard, now it's a whiteboard. You know, let students see that. Let someone come in and talk about transfer. Those are the kinds of things that are important. The strategies that we created between institutions, task force meetings. Our community college created academic senate or faculty senate driven governance committees so that it became a part of the structure. The transfer was a part of their conversation in all of the work that they were doing. And getting faculty involved. Do you know faculty at East LA College decided that they were not transferring, that students were not applying for financial aid, so they took it upon themselves, 8 faculty. They were taught how to do the FAFSA, and they went into every single class and said, did you apply for FAFSA? Their numbers jumped hundreds of percentages just by the fact that somebody came in to talk. So those are the kinds of things that are really important for us as we think about building partnerships. The bridge programs, the funding models, and all of those things are really, really important. As I said, the ambassador or the peer advisors, there's no better person out there than a student to talk about what it is that their experience was and what they're doing now. And that's really important and intentional. The 5 C's of effective partnerships for me have been a commitment to the partnership, to the student, to the intention of what you're doing, the collaboration efforts, making sure that you're both doing the kinds of things that need to happen, coordinating between each other and not having one institution do all of the different kinds of things to make it happen, cooperation amongst the campus partners, and communication. We had a partner with a community college who all I'll say is that it got stuck at one of the administrative levels and nobody got the information. So making sure the communication gets to the right people is really important, because people were like, well, what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, we had that conversation and they never got that information. So making sure that you know, we have that. So I want to talk just a minute about East LA College, because that's been one of our most successful partnerships. It is a campus that is probably 15 miles from UCLA, which in LA terms could be an hour and a half. If you're on a bus in our great transportation system, could be a 3-hour bus ride, and so on. But we have students to do it, and we wanted to really think about what we were doing. So I took our chancellor there to visit first time a chancellor of a research university had ever been to a community college. So when I told him about it, I said, I want to bring you to UCLA. I want to take you to East LA College. He's like, okay, well, we can go and we do a meeting. I said, no, no, no. We're going to do a 4-hour meeting. It's not just a hi, we want you, bye. I want meetings with the president, the administration, with faculty leaders, with student leaders. I want a lecture. I want a tour, that. And I brought a team of people. I brought the director of admissions, director of financial aid, students, counselors, advisors. We all came together. We met in different groups, in large groups. We talked about what we wanted to do. And so the important part of that was really looking at the purpose. Why were we there? To increase the number of students who came to our university. The participants, so I wanted admissions there because I wanted them to see these students. I wanted the financial aid. And I wanted the relationships to build between the follow-up that would happen after this meeting. And the important part was it created this synergy at East LA with faculty that wanted to get more involved in that. And they really talked about the kinds of things that were really important. The priority of making transfer important. Establishing the transfer of students as a high institutional priority is what we basically got there. And you'll have these slides. So the second element in our book is really about the outcomes, the outreach and the resources, which I already talked about, but looking at courses and articulation and requirements. And why is it that the faculty or the dean at in life sciences decides they're going to change the requirements for admissions without letting anyone else know except admissions, and yet nobody in community colleges knows about this because they don't even teach the class that is now required for students to be admitted. That's the kind of stuff that we talk about that's really critical and intentional about when you're making decisions. Those are the kinds of impacts that you need to make sure that you have. Looking at the academic and financial aid, one thing is, do you have scholarships for transfer students and only transfer students? Or do they compete with all these other students? And are the scholarships intentional? And do they match in terms of dollar amounts? And all of those kinds of things. Looking at the intentionality of what you're providing these students is really important. As I said, do you have a Students with Dependent Center for students to go to find out what it is that they should be or should know, et cetera. Looking at family and community. Our students come with family. They don't come by themselves most of the time. So what are we doing to ensure that? All of our programming in my center has a parent or family component. So we educate the family to let them know what their student is going to be doing and why it's important. And I come from a first-gen family, and I couldn't even talk to my parents about higher education because they had no concept. My mother was educated in the 4th grade. My father was in the 2nd grade. They didn't know any of that. And so I didn't know how to go home and talk to them. But what could have happened is people could have said, here's some things that you could do at home that would help them. Like, don't require them to throw the trash every day. Those things that I always laugh about because, when you're home, you have to do everything that you were doing then. And it's like, my mother would say, why are you say you have to be in the library for 3 hours? It's like, that's kind of the stuff they don't understand. Or when I went home for college the first time at like 11:30, my mother's like, mijo, aren't you in college? And I'm like, yeah, Mom, but I had a class this morning and I have a class at 5. And she's like, are you really in college? Because to her, you're in school, you get in at 8:30 and you're out at 3 o'clock. You don't come home. And so it's those kinds of things, trying to help educate the parents about what it really means to be in college. And then lastly, I said research and assessment. Are we really doing the kinds of things that we wanted to do? I wanted to provide this guide for you on what we have developed at UCLA as a transfer receptive culture, looking at all the pieces and all the places. We coordinated a team called the Transfer Success Team at UCLA, where we bring people together from all different areas that deal with transfer, that touch transfer, and trying to make sure that it's intentional, that they know what's going on, and students are part of this committee. And we are fortunate that about maybe 7 years ago or so, our students felt like they were not being represented well in the student government. So they created a position that is a transfer student representative. So now on the board, student government board, there is a representative that represents the transfer students, and that person gets lots of money, and they also get an office with other people to work on efforts focused on transfer on the campus. And so we get together with all of them to say, what's going on? What do we need to help you with? What do you need us to know, et cetera? And have, monthly conversation, which have been really helpful, because when the pandemic came and they were trying to figure out how are they going to use some of the housing, and they could only have one person in a room instead of three, et cetera, they said, well, we're going to offer all freshman students housing. And then we stand up, of course, I stand up and said, excuse me, what about transfer students that are coming in? Where are they going to go? And they're like, well, they're college students. Yeah, well, so are the freshmen. And so, having those conversations are really important, so we understand the kinds of things that are critical in that. And developing equitable student transfer goals, trying to make sure that all of the things that we're doing are focused on equity. How do you strengthen the partnerships on your to actualize those goals? How are there spaces and places, as I mentioned earlier, transfer student center, parenting centers, students with dependents, et cetera? How is your commitment to transfer students actualized? What are you doing and what do they see? And all of those kinds of things. So thinking about the goals that you have for this, and then trying to figure out how they play into the institutional goals. Some of the challenges, I'm going to go through just a couple because there were a lot. And one of them is that change takes forever in an institution, right? It's not something that's going to happen next week. Okay, here's $100,000. Go make this happen. Well, guess what? That only pays for a staff person maybe, and a little bit of dollars here. So, oh, it's a lot of money we gave you. Well, yeah, you don't know much about these things, but looking at those kinds of things that are really important. And guess what? Faculty have never been involved in transfer. So what can I do as a faculty member? You can talk about transfer. If you are a transfer student, you can talk about it. You can ask questions, you can learn, you can do all of those things. The incentive to redesign curriculum. I was telling the group last night that when I first started this many years ago, one of the things that I found with faculty is students who are first-gen low income, starting in math, start at very low levels. And it takes 5 or 6 semester courses to get to a transferable level course. In 5 or 6 semesters, that's 3 years of work. They're gone. Life happens. They have things that they need to attend to. So my thing was, as I was sitting there talking to UCLA faculty that have been there since the university opened in 1919, I said, what can we do to try to change that, to really try to shorten it without losing the foundation, because we know that's critical. And the answer is nothing. You can do nothing. And just that brick wall, and I thought there's got to be some way we can do that. I talked to some new faculty and they said, oh, we have some ideas. And we went with their ideas by increasing supplemental instruction in the classroom and a number of other things. But it's a matter of making sure that you're providing opportunities for people to engage in the conversations to change the work that we're doing. Create a transfer task force. And I won't go through that, but it's basically acknowledge and assess discuss the challenge or the problem, and then make it a priority. Really important to really take this on. And then to include students, include people who might not be the normal person that you would think should be in that space. One of the things that I learned with some of our facilities people, it's really interesting because you have people that clean your offices and they watch what you do and they ask a lot of questions. And I kept talking with them and saying, do you have children? Yeah. I said, do you know what this university is about? No, because that's not what they're in tune to. Some of them may or may not have education, et cetera. So I said, let's do a program for all the facilities workers and invite them to invite their children here so we can teach them and their children about university and what it is. But looking at all of those things that are really important and looking outside that box to figure out how are we going to get this information to people who might not normally know that they should have it or never knew how to get it. So those kinds of things. What we do know, peer advising is critical. As I said, I've said this before, you know it, student to student is the best way to do it. Counselors are essential. And here's where I'm going to just rub a little bit, because counselors are counselors and counselors are not counselors. And one of the things that I hear from a lot of students is my counselor said to me, here, take this information, read it, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about transfer. And I'm like, that's not, to me, an effective person. So looking at what we can do to help counselors get the information that is necessary for them to be advocates for transfer is really important. Faculty support for transfer is critical. As I said before, walking into the classroom, hearing a faculty talk about transfer is really where it begins. Faculty spend more time with students than anyone else on that campus. They should have more of an impact in the work that is being done around transfer. Some recommendations, which I'll skip over for a moment, because I want to talk about the end of all education should surely be the service to others. The work that you do is critical. The work that you do changes lives, and it should be intentional. It is intrusive, but it should be intentionally intrusive, because you want to make sure that students who don't think they need this information get it anyway. All of us who come from first-generation backgrounds never believed that we would be at a place like where I'm at now. When I started school, I never thought I was going to be a dean or I was going to be in higher education. That was not my goal. But here I am now, and I should use that to make sure that students understand that I come from the same kind of a place. And it's important for you to understand and realize that. And that's what I learned through the work that we do through Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and all of those that come before. So that's my information. I hope that it's given you some bit of information. I'm not sure we have any time for Q&A. I said that I would finish earlier than I did, but you know, when you start talking, you never stop. But I'll leave it to Jason to decide. I think we'll...
Now, we're going to transition to the next session, and we're going to, don't go away. We're going to take 5 minutes. So we provide some time for our presidents to come up, and folks can stretch and get some something to eat or drink. And I think intentionality and intrusiveness are the two words that are resonating with me, and I hope that's resonating with you as well. So thank you for coming. This is for you. We're grateful. And Alfred is going to be with us all day. So please come say hi and ask questions, hopefully, if you're willing to take them. So join me in thanking him again. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, we'll get started about 5 after. All right, we are going to get started. So love all the conversation going on. So if we can make our ways back to our seats, that is appreciated. So please continue to refill your beverages and food, and we're going to invite our presidents up, and I'm going to introduce Thomas Chase Haygood, who many of you know. He is our Senior Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Undergraduate Studies at the University of Utah, and he's going to help guide our conversation here. So we'll welcome him, and then he'll introduce our president. So please join me in welcoming our presidents and Chase Haygood to the stage.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I think most of us in the room know both of our presidents, so their introductions are going to be very, very brief, and then I'm going to turn time over to both of our presidents, taking about 5-10 minutes, provide us with remarks and comments that they have, and then we'll enter into a little bit of a Q&A. They've seen those questions, and we'll spend about 45 minutes in that conversation after they've concluded remarks. These are very, very brief. Denise Huftelin is the 8th president of Salt Lake Community College, the state's most diverse institution of higher education in the state. Taylor Randall is the 17th president of the University of Utah, the state's flagship institution of higher education. With that, President Huftelin, President Randall, remarks that you might have. And feel free to do it seated or at the left.
Okay.
All right. Yep.
I'll pop up here first because I probably can't get the other mic turned on. It'll take me 10 minutes. Glad you are all here. Anyway, it's fabulous to see so many people interested in our transfer pathways. So how many of you, just so I get a sense, from Salt Lake Community College? Where is that?
Woohoo!
All right, that's good. Great to see you all. And then the rest, I assume, are from the U of U. All right, good. And let's just a big cheer together for transfer
Yeah,
students.
yeah.
Anyway. I want to just give you a little bit of context. This is our fourth summit, obviously, and this is our single, from the University of Utah's perspective, our single most important institutional partnership that we have. 25% of all of our students in a given year are transfer students, and Salt Lake Community College represents about 40% of all transfer students. So this is by far our single biggest institutional partnership and our most important. The second thing I want to just kind of talk about briefly is that the promise of higher education in our state is not reaching enough individuals. And for sure, there are criticisms of higher education. I actually don't believe most of them. And the reason I don't believe most of them is I think every one of us could sit down and provide examples, right, of how education delivered value, delivered access, and delivered a completely different life trajectory by really fundamentally the transfer students that come through our institutions. I had an interesting experience when I was dean of the business school. My faculty, right, would say, we need to understand transfer students. And we sat down and we examined the success and what had happened with transfer students in our own college. And one single visit I made to Wall Street points this out. Of the 5 visits I made in a single day to investment bankers on Wall Street making millions of dollars, 3 of them had been transfer students from Salt Lake Community College. So, just to dispel the notion, right, that you can't, it's a different pathway, there's different success, that's completely wrong. I think we actually have to really acknowledge, right, that people mature differently on social dimensions, on intellectual dimensions, and what we've got to do together is find ways that we bring more access, and we've got to break down the barriers between our institutions, and we got to figure out ways that if we were to take a look at our service area, we could say in 5 years, we have whatever it is, 5%, 10%, why not 20%? More people entering into pathways to higher education. So that's one. The second thing I really hope you start thinking about is we just need to start fundamentally challenging some of the assumptions we have. We ourselves are getting mired in too much bureaucracy, and I hate bureaucracy, right? And so I want us to start thinking at a little bit higher level. And the example I use is articulation. How many of us over the years have been wrapped up, well, what about this class, and et cetera, et cetera. I would just challenge you that if we were to take a meta look at this, I think we would be surprised to see that it doesn't matter as much as we think. And so we're getting mired down too much in specifics. Let's just take a broad approach, right? And think about articulation for a second. I don't want this to be too much of a soapbox. Each of our institutions need creativity, right? You're dealing with different populations, right? The University of Utah, and I don't even want to sound elitist or not, they're just different populations, right? And you want to be able to tailor a general ed curriculum to get a set of basic principles apart. Let's just decide on those basic principles. And then let's forget about the hours for a second and just say, if you got those principles down, right, and we feel good about that, check. Come to the University of Utah and start here rather than having to work about all the classes. Let's make this easier. And I think we can think about hundreds of ways, right, that we can we can do that. And if you don't feel like you have permission, you're getting it from me today, right? I mean, just break down these barriers. And if you're nervous about it, I would encourage you to think about it. Just say, Well, let's try it for, I don't know, 200 students. And let's compare them to the other way we're doing it, right? And maybe that will give us the surety that things are happening. But we've got to increase the fundamental experimentation that's going on between our two institutions. The second thing or the third thing that I kind of want you to all to think about, and where's Rob Patton? Rob writes my thing. I'm totally off script at this point, right? Yeah, so I apologize. He's like, I always have to apologize because can we just give an applause for Rob for a second? He writes so much for me, and then he goes, "Well, thanks, Taylor. You did it again." I'm like, I didn't. This one's like, I haven't even turned the second page. So anyway, I apologize. Now where was I? Anyway, the third thing is I want us to think about a geographic service area, right, that we overlap. And I want us together to say, how would we increase the penetration, and what is the appropriate interface we need to have with our districts? And I'm going to tell the University of Utah that we don't have to, we do need connection with the districts, but in certain populations, we don't. This should be where Salt Lake Community College excels. And I'm going to ask Denise questions about the programs that she's already got in place. There's outstanding programs, right, to reach in to probably populations that generally you wouldn't think would go to higher ed, that need to go to Salt Lake Community College first. And I think we got to just, right, we got to clear lanes, and we got to make sure we are uber focused on what each of us do in terms of outreach to our partners in public education. There are, I think, partnerships that can be forged between us and industry that will make our joint offerings a lot more attractive to students that right now are saying higher ed is not my thing. The fourth thing, I think, am I on 4? I mean, I got 5, so I think I'm on 4 anyway, and then I'm going to sit down. But the fourth thing is I want you to take on myths, right? And I just want you to blow them out of water. Is college non-affordable? Not in this state. It's amazing, right? And we do need, and there are 2 ways we take on myths. The first is an in-state student at the University of Utah. Our list price is high. It's $10,000. That's what people focus on, and they freak out. An in-state student at the University of Utah pays on average $4,000 a year after all of the aid, right? And I would guess, I haven't looked at it yet, if we looked at a transfer student, if you combine what happens at Salt Lake Community College and what comes here, so that's, for University of Utah, that's $16,000. I would guess if you looked at the transfer, we're well below $16,000 together, right? I mean, that's not even the price of a used car, right, that you would be proud of driving. And that's like 10 years old, let's just say, right? And so we fundamentally, right, can just, that's one myth, right? That is one myth we can take and we should just blow out of the water with data. And by the way, if the data don't disprove the myth, then we need to change something and we need to disprove the myth. So President Huffman and I have talked a lot about scholarships for transfer programs. I'm committed to increasing those. If the data proves that we're just still way too high, let's get to work and let's blow these myths out of the water. By the way, there are plenty of other myths, right? You're never going to get a job, blah, 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 blah. Not true, right? People graduating from the University of Utah, the national median for jobs is 59,500, and we crushed that number with 6,500 or 60,500. So $1,000 more than the national median, but we're ahead. If you don't get a college degree of any sort, whether it's associated or not, you're kind of stuck at 39,000 right now. Now take those 2 numbers together. College degree, let's call it, I'm going to guess this, between our 2 institutions jointly is maybe $10,000 or $12,000. I mean, the payback is 1 year's salary, right? In a simple sense. So let's just start crushing. Let's just start crushing these issues. The 5th point that I want to make is just how proud I am of all of you. I get great feedback on a regular basis of the progress we're making out at Harriman. I know that that is wrenching the guts of all of our institutions to try to figure out how to deliver this. But I am just really proud of all of you for doing it, because you're doing it with positivity. I'm excited about that partnership. I think that can be transformative in so many ways. Excited for President Huftel and I to sit down and think about what the next piece of that is. And with that, I'm going to read the last thing that Rob told me to write. Thanks, Rob. Sorry. Thank you.
Rob, I'll read your speech. Do you want to give it to me and I'll do it for you? Thank you, Taylor, and thank you, all of you. I've got notes too, but I'm gonna follow President Randall's lead and go off script a little bit. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I see lots of familiar faces, both at Salt Lake Community College colleagues, and also University of Utah colleagues. Let it be known, I'm a Ute alum. I'm a proud Ute alum. I want to work very, very closely with you. I hope that we've always signaled that. So I come in peace, but I'm going to say things that might be hard to hear. But I just think that the impact we can have working together is unbelievable in this service area. And I have had the good fortune since I've been president to work with 3 wonderful presidents at the University of Utah. And I will tell you that has not always been the case, frankly. So just a couple things I want to hit on. First of all, I believe this is the 4th summit, and I think I've been at all 4. So I think we're here, we're not going anywhere, and we're going to continue the conversation. And I thank you so much for hosting it. We really want to host it next year. We're looking forward to hosting it. So next year, when we invite you to our campus, I hope we get as big a crowd and maybe even a bigger crowd. And I hope that we have some new news to share about some of the recommendations that President Randall just kind of urged you to consider. So the first notion is just thank you for being here. We look forward to this continued work. And I want to start with Harriman. So I think it was about 7 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I came to David Pershing's office and I said, I have this scathingly brilliant idea. And those of you that know The Parent Trap will know that that's a quote from Haley Mills. But if you're not that old, just look it up. I had this scathingly brilliant idea, and he was like, what do you want to do? I said, I think we want to do a building in Harriman. It's the biggest growing southwest quadrant. Everybody's moving there. That's the only place there's land. We should do a building together. And he goes, that's a great idea, but I have 3 buildings in front of that. I can't advocate for that building because you had a huge queue. And I totally get it. That's the way our system made us do things. When President Pershing left and President Watkins walked in the door, I swear she was here a week, and she called me and she said, we're going to do Harriman. So she just lit it up. And we advanced that building and that promise of a new model for higher education very quickly. We still had to kind of trudge through that process, but that building is opening the end of May. We are all going to move in there. We're going to be real-time neighbors in this building. And I know it has not been without gnashing of teeth to figure out how to do this. So I just want to underscore this idea of asking questions about fundamental assumptions that we carry with us as higher ed professionals. A lot of them do not make sense anymore, and they really don't make sense for the students that we're serving. So I know we hang on to them because they make us feel like we did it, so they can do it. And we want to kind of, socialize and kind of reproduce that. I think we really have to fundamentally examine those and interrogate them and turn them on their heads and try something new. And I love Taylor's idea. Try it with a pilot. And if it doesn't work, okay. If it does work, then amen. We've shifted the needle. So I'm going to ask the Harriman, those of you, how many in the room are actually working on Harriman connections, transfer, participation, or are going to teach there? Anyone? Okay. So you should be talking to each other over lunch. You should be pushing on, what isn't working, what's weird, what is a pain point, how do we solve that? Because I have been talking about that building for 6 years. I'm so excited for it to come out of the ground. And the last thing I want to have happen is have something like a bad divorce, like just something horribly painful and ugly, and it ruins this relationship. I know it won't happen, but I just out there in the back of my mind, I just worry, okay, do we have the right people in the room? Are we making the right decisions? Have we resourced it enough? Are we creative enough in our thinking? So I'm so excited for that building, but I'm going to urge us to continue to be innovative and creative, and we've got great people there to solve some of those issues. Those folks in Harriman and Bluffdale and Riverton are so excited that we're going to be there. And those high schools are bursting at the seams with students that want to come to college, whether they want to start with us and then go to you, or they want to come right to you. We can do that together. So that's a great, great thing. The other thing I want to ask about is just, yes, transfer pathways need to be smoother. I'm going to ask, I love what President Randall's saying about this whole idea of just program articulation and package articulation and not the granular nitty gritty. You haven't ticked this box. The other thing I'm going to ask is co-curricular transfer partnerships. And Jason and I have talked about this. A lot of the students that I hear from that come back after transferring to this U say, it's so big. I'm so intimidated. I don't want to be there anymore. They know they have, this has nothing to do with academic rigor. They can handle it. What they can't handle is bigger classrooms, not feeling like they belong, and being in spaces where they're the only person that looks like them. That's a big deal. So how do you create non-curricular transfer communities that reduce your space, create a community where they belong and they know someone's going to miss them when they don't show up? I spoke with Marty Bradley to your presidential interns about 2 months ago. Those students are flying. They are so great. But they have that community, that little program that they're in, man, they all know each other. They know each other's story. They support each other. They check in on each other when they're struggling. All of your students need that, especially those that transfer, and especially first-gen students or students of color who transfer and who need a smaller community. So help them find that. I think you could have a Bruin Resource Center. I know it's a UCLA thing, but we're the Bruins. You could just make a Bruin Resource Center because most of your transfer students come from us. The Wildcat student they could find their way into the Bruin Resource Center if they need to. But I just love this idea that they see themselves here when they transfer and they know exactly where to go. So I just loved that part of what you were talking about. Then the last thing I would just say is about admissions. And I just love what President Randall said. We have this service area. We are responsible for Salt Lake County. The college age population is going up. It's not going to go up for very long. And then it's already declining rapidly in other parts of the country. That cliff is coming to us. So we got to strike while the iron is hot, and it's not all that hot, but it's going up a little. And the college going rate is going down in Salt Lake County. And it's been going down for the last 10 years. So we're asking you to do something harder in this context. But what I worry about with that is when we can finally convince students and their parents that they are college material. If they come to us and we welcome them and they do 2 or 3 years with us and then transfer successfully, that is such a wonderful story. If you admit them, and they come up here and they feel lost after a semester and they don't feel like they belong and they stop out, they think it's them. They don't think it's you. And they're not going to come back because we just proved they weren't college material. And that is not right. So I'm going to ask you in your admissions processes to find ways to refer students to us first who would better excel with us. That is so counterintuitive for me to say. Don't admit students, send them to us. But that's what we should do as good partners. I don't know the criteria. I don't know how you do it, but there are some students that should start with us, get successful, feel academically confident, and then come to you and soar. So that relationship between freshman admits and referring them back and transfer admits, those have to be hand in hand in terms of how we do our work. I worry that college going rate is going down. And so we have a slim margin and we want to do everything we can to make those that do decide to apply to college feel successful from the minute they apply and get enrolled, that they feel like they belong. So with that, I've got some stats and stuff that I'll share during our conversation here, but I think I'll leave it at that. And we can start with the questions.
So we'll begin. Can you all hear me okay? Am I mic'd appropriately? All right, followed my instructions. We'll begin with basically two questions for both of the presidents. And again, on the behalf of all of us, I would just say thanks to both the presidents who are incredibly busy folks and who have taken time to not only share remarks, but share vision and thinking and entertain a couple of questions with us this morning. The first of those is, and both of you have touched on elements of this question, but can either of you, or in conversation together, talk a little bit about why bachelor's degrees and pathways to bachelor's degrees via community college transfer are part of the economic, social mobility and social impact that in some ways is shared between the two institutions?
Is a PhD with no practical
Do
skills.
you want me to give you the
I
cover?
hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
I hear
Did
you.
I actually do that?
I think you
Okay.
did.
This thing keeps asking me if the mute's off, and it appears it is. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just underscore some statistics, because I think that question is fundamentally answered by what we just said, that Salt Lake County is our service region. It's the second largest county. It's the most racially and diverse county. It's probably got it's hard, we need a really good metric for socioeconomic status, which we don't have system-wide. But I would argue that it has the most diversity in terms of socioeconomic status. So therefore, this is a community that needs us to respond as effectively as possible to get them through college. So I actually think it's more incumbent on us together as partners than anyone else in the state to strengthen the workforce and the economic development and the trained workers, but from my vantage point, more importantly, the educated citizens who can move into the world of work and careers, into families and parenthood and PTA meetings and local government, who have been educated, who are willing to talk and think and challenge civilly one another. I mean, come on, just look at the country and then make an argument for the fact that we don't need more educated folks. And this is the county where that diversity is so rich that we could just lead out in who I don't want to say the word produce, that feels manufacturing, but how do we help those folks achieve their educational goals and get into our communities and just be amazing leaders?
I think one of the things I would like to just talk about is kind of what we define as pathways and what that means. And I want to tie it to my observations. A lot of this is, as you all know, we're trying to partner together, not only in Harriman, but in West Valley. And as part of our attempt to try to understand how we ought to invest in West Valley City and in the West Valley, I've spent, it's probably every other month I go and meet with community leaders and citizens just to understand what they would like to see out of education. And I think this is the way they would define a pathway. They would say, in my head, going to higher education involves taking a couple of years, 4 years, 6 years out of life. And I can't do that because I'm supporting a family. Because frankly, I don't get why I have to take this class. It doesn't actually immediately improve, right, my socioeconomic status, which goes back to my first issue. I'm trying to support my family. And you begin to realize that we're making them fit their life into our structure, and we're not fitting our education into their life. And they're at a point in where they are, where they dream bigger than most of us do, but they can't fit what we have into their life. And so to me, a pathway is really stopping for a second and understanding what they need to fit into their life and start with them. So completely focused. And then, I think it becomes relatively straightforward after that to say, geez, there's 6 or 7 pathways that most people want to fit into, right? And those do hit our curriculum. It's healthcare, it's business, it's hospitality, it's a trade and construction. And then I don't think what we've done well enough is make sure that our pathways through all of our institutions will fit into their life, right? And the one we've been working on is healthcare. So I get a CNA, great, I can get that in high school. Well, you know, what we then ought to do is say, gee, you can't afford education, they ought to work in our healthcare system for a little while in our hospital, right? And just so you know, what we're working to do is actually free up time in our healthcare system where we pay them a few hours a week to work or to work on their next certificate. But the next certificate from CNA, by the way, isn't going to be offered by the University of Utah. It's most likely going to be offered by Salt Lake Community College. And so we have to figure out a way that then they can pay for and figure that out. That's not just curricular. It's when you have the time to study, how are you going to fit it in? How are you going to pay for it? So together we have to capture that. And then they may do 2 or 3 of those certificates and stop. And what we hope is that pathway has then lifted that family in an incredible way. But they also might say, oh my gosh, now I'm going to be a nurse, or now I want to be a doctor. And those pathways continue. But at each moment, we're assessing, and we have our pathway has an ability to understand where they are in life and what they need, and we can deliver it. And you know what? This goes contrary to what we're trying to do with completion rates in the state. This is kind of frustrating to me, but I don't care if that takes years or 10 years, right? We've achieved what we needed to do. And so to me, for these populations which are not attending our universities, these are the questions we have to ask. We have to design pathways for people, not for careers, not for a degree. We have to meet them where they are.
I think I'm going to turn this on and off because I was hearing the feedback. I think that might help. Does that come back on now? Did it come back on? Yeah, there it is. Okay. I want to just share a few statistics because I think these are important for folks to hear. And I want to thank Jeff Baird and the folks from your area too, that they've been working really hard on transfer metrics. A few years ago, when we did our strategic plan in 2016, 2017, we started looking for transfer metrics because one of our goals was to improve transfer success. So we couldn't find national good data on what, what's your aspirational goal for transfer? So we just made one up. It's called the transfer conversion rate. And what we said was that we wanted it so that students that transferred from Salt Lake Community College in 4 years could get their bachelor's degree. We wanted that percentage to go up. And that's one of the 5 metrics we've looked at carefully for the last 7 years. That's one of the 5 metrics that hasn't moved. It's actually gone down. Now, we had a little thing called a worldwide pandemic in the middle of that, which threw everything off. So the numbers hopefully are going to rebound. But that's a metric that we have very little control over once we get them to you. And so I guess one of the things I just want to kind of echo is the scale of those folks. Okay, so 80% of our new SLCC students say they want to transfer. Okay, 80,000. If all 80,000 of those actually transfer, that's 32,000 students a year that we serve. Now we know that doesn't happen, right? They stop out, life happens. But you are by far the college, the university of choice for our students. So that connection between the two of us is imperative because most of our students are geographically bound. They're working, they have families, they're here. They're not going to go live in the dorms at Utah State and go to fraternity parties. That's not who they are. They're going to stay right where they are and they're going to come to you and they need access to you all. Of that, so last year, we graduate about 2,600 students annually in transfer programs. And again, the majority of them are going to come to you. Of those, 70% transfer and earn, and 40% of those earn a bachelor's degree in 4 years. We wanted to get that to 60%. It hasn't moved. So that's a metric that we could start working on more carefully and figuring out through focus groups or qualitative analysis, what's going on. You've got phenomenal transfer students in the room who I know who can talk about their experience and help you. I know you're already doing that. You've got a transfer innovation center that many of our students have helped you think through. So listen, please listen to what they're saying. But here's the things that I wanted to mention. In 2017 and 2018 alone, we had nearly 7,700 transfer students opt out and never come back. So we've also got this huge some college, no degree population that we're trying to get back. You're trying to get back. UVU's trying to get to come south. Everybody's trying to get those folks back. And if we could find a way earlier on in their SLCC career to connect them to you, so they know they have a home in their first semester with us, they know that they're going to be at the U and they've already started forming those relationships. That stop out will go down, and that seamless continuity of registration, enrollment, completion will go up. So some of those connections way before they're at 62 credit hours, I think are really, really important. And one other quick fact, and that is that it's all transfers are not created equal. The students that come here and succeed, most of the two groups that do not do that at the same rate, and those are Black students and first generation students. So when you disaggregate the data, we do have certain identity groups that we really need to pay attention to and do things a little differently, create senses of belonging, look at curricular and pedagogical approaches so that we can make those groups and those identities more successful.
Awesome. So our next question builds off of things that you both shared in remarks and then have articulated here in some detail, but forward looking out on the horizon in terms of possibilities for public higher education in the Salt Lake Valley, where are those unique? You both mentioned Harriman, you both mentioned the U of U Health pathways, et cetera. What are some others? Where do those meld from your views, the two institutions together in some really strategic and innovative ways?
You know, we've mentioned already the nut to crack is, call it for lack of a term, deeper penetration of individuals attending both of our institutions. With that rate declining, I don't think it's only any, you know, why is it declining? People say it's just the economics, right? We've got great opportunities. I don't think that's, I actually think that would prove to be false if we studied it. I think what we ought to do is wildly experiment, right? With options that would be appealing to people. And this is going to be a critique of us as academics. It's probably not thinking like we think now. I think if you're analyzing this and you have more than one traditional academic in the room, you're going to miss. And I would suggest things like, and to be quite honest, it may have nothing to do with academics at first. I would suggest we order pizzas for 15 people and we just sit them down. People that are not coming to college, and just understand qualitatively why they are not doing that, and just listen. And you should do that over and over and over again. I know this is my example. When I was dean of the business school, that was fundamentally our design strategy for a couple of programs that we put into place. But by and large, it had nothing to do with the curriculum. It had everything to do with, how do I fit in? How can I quickly fit in? How can I get over a set of fears that I have, right? One of those fears, by the way, is I can't make up my mind quickly, and I want to be able to explore. Our curriculum is not set up to explore in any way, shape, or form, right? We try, but I couldn't in a month decide. I mean, you tell me, here would be the use case. I'm trying to decide between medicine and engineering, right? How in 3 weeks could I give someone some information to be able to decide between those two pathways, right? And we just don't. That turned out to be one of the fears that we found in our own students that were coming to our population, and one of the reasons they were so disgruntled with kind of the sets of services. And my guess is you will find 5 or 6 of those. The other one, by the way, is I don't understand the social structure. What am I going to do? I'm not excited about joining a sorority or fraternity, so I need to be able to find friends. And by the way, not this was our observation, not what they said. Yeah, you're not actually that good at communicating at your age, right? And so as we thought about this curricularly, we started thinking about how would you design a first year experience so they naturally had something to talk about and some purpose. And so we literally designed exercises where they would have to stay up all night working on a project, and they knew what they had to talk about. And you know what, it didn't take too long, a few months, where all of a sudden there were friendships and nice conversations. And that was the curriculum acting in a social way that was very, very, very different. But you know, most of us stayed in school for long periods of time. And I will tell people, I have one skill in life. Turns out I can take standardized tests. And that's why I remained in school so long, right? But most of our people are not like us, right? They're very, very different, and we've got to listen. So that probably didn't answer your question, but I think as we listen, you're going to see big opportunities and pathways and different ways of doing things.
I'm going to throw out an idea. Is that on? No?
No.
Robert, no? Well, now it's going to come on, I bet. Watch. Now it's going to work. Yes?
There it is. Yep.
Watch out. I'm going to come after your job. Okay, here's an idea. So President Randall referred to our PACE high school programs. We're in 5 high schools. We're soon to be in 6. We're at Highland, West, East, Cottonwood, Kearns, and we're going to be in Granger in the fall. My goal would be that it be in every high school in Salt Lake County that has a college going rate that's not acceptable. That's pretty much every high school. But let's start with those that have the lowest rates, and then we'll get to the ones that have the higher rates. The College Access Advisor Program, in my mind, is a fabulous program, and it has really helped a lot of students that never got to see their high school counselor in high school because they either weren't smoking pot in the parking lot or they weren't in the IB program. Those are the only people that see high school counselors, right? So the College Access Advisor, good for you. But I would love PACE to be in every single high school. Then I want middle school counselors in those middle schools that feed into those high schools. And all they're doing is family engagement and leadership development. So that those students, by the time they're in 8th grade, they realize how smart they are. And then they go into PACE, they do what PACE asks them to, they get a 2-year scholarship to us, then they get a 2-year scholarship to you. So that in 6th grade, families, especially families on the West Side, see a totally clear path through the University of Utah. And they know how they're going to pay for it. Wouldn't that be amazing? That would be amazing, because families have all of these myths in their head. The national news are telling them that college is out of reach. It's not affordable. That's hooey in the state of Utah. Flat out stupid. It is not true. In fact, you guys don't do this. Well, they won't let you, but you could raise your tuition significantly and still be very affordable. Let's just put that out there. But we have some constraints. But it is very affordable. And if we mapped it out for families in 6th grade, and then again in 7th grade, and then in 8th grade, by the time they got to their PACE high school, they would know they could afford it. They would know how to do the FAFSA. They would come to either right to you or through us. And they would finish up probably 6, 7, 8 years, given their lives. But at least they would have had that path, and they wouldn't be, on the eve of their high school graduation, wondering what they're going to do. So that's my big idea, is in Salt Lake County, let's start in the high schools where we already are. Let's expand that program. Let's make that program come to you. Taylor and I have talked about our PACE students coming into your business. Is it First Ascent? Is that your business program? Our PACE students that want to study business coming right into your First Ascent program, having that community, living in a hall with other First Ascent students, that community that makes it small for them, gives them a scholarship, gets them in housing. Housing insecurity is a big deal. We're trying to get housing on our campus. We've been less successful than you have been with housing, but we're working on that. So kind of starting to build those infrastructures very early on and amplifying them in the county so that every family knows what's going on. We were looking at Tennessee's high school graduation rate and FAFSA completion yesterday in a P20 Alliance meeting. Don't quote me, these numbers might be wrong, but they're close. I think their high school graduation rate in Tennessee is between 80 and 90%. and their FAFSA completion rates are like 68%. So students know in high school that they have a Pell Grant. And we have tried and tried and tried to strengthen FAFSA completion in the state to no avail. So helping families understand the financial realities and how to afford college is huge for us. We've got to figure out a way to do that better.
So I want to double down. Is this on? Not yet. Says mute on. All right. I want to double down on what she just said. Is that working? There we go. Okay, got it. I think that's a spectacular idea. I've long envied the PACE program, right? So those of you at the University of Utah, how would we participate in this? Because in my mind, the way this would happen is we go all the way back to middle school and you start painting these paths, right? One path is, if whatever, we'll name the paths perhaps, but one path is exactly that. The other path, by the way, the path of go to Salt Lake Community College and then the U can be enhanced by the painting the picture of what they'll do at the U once they got through, right? I mean, we can help Salt Lake Community College in a big way here. Say, you want to be an engineer? Well, you're not, it's probably a better fit to go there first. And then look, you'll still become an engineer. Or use my example of the Wall Street people, right? You'll still be able to go anywhere in the world you possibly want. The Wall Street job, by the way, is the lowest probability job I have here. Think about that. 3 of the 5, right? Came through from Salt Lake Community College and then went on to Wall Street. And then similar, I think, as Denise mentioned, we've got to get more sophisticated on the advising together. Hey, you are a candidate to go right to the University of Utah. You can do that. The FAFSA thing's great. What could we do there? Could we jointly invest in financial aid counselors, right, at high schools?
Well, they're doing a lot there. It's a complicated issue, right? But there's things we could do. Can you hear me if I just yell and use my theater voice? Okay. No, I'm all right. I've got a diaphragm that I can call upon. Oh, I didn't think about that. I actually think we actually tried to get FAFSA required as a high school application, or excuse me, a high school graduation requirement. Texas did it. If Texas can do it, we can do it. It didn't work. So, but their FAFSA completion rates went significantly up. There's an opt-out for undocumented student. There's an opt-out. Don't freak out. There's an opt-out if you don't want a federally form to fill out. We know all of those nuances. I get those nuances. We'll consider those. But those FAFSA completion rates went way up. We are working on an alternative state form for financial need. That would be a big winner. But really helping parents and the simplified FAFSA will help this coming out in December. Translating that into different languages. I mean, there's a lot we could do to try to strengthen that. But I want to acknowledge what has happened in the high schools and our universities around that. We have gone up. We're now 50th out of 51. We're going up, but there's room for improvement.
But just think about the ideation that could go on there. I mean, to me, if you're making, I don't know about you, but I don't just go buy a car tomorrow. It takes me a couple of years to save up and figure it out. I mean, the reality is the second they hit high school, they need to figure out what that financial plan is, right? And they need to know how they're going to do it, at least have a pathway, and they can start figuring out the savings and where it comes from. There's so many tools. Many universities do a great job of this. I think we've just got to start earlier than most. And again, this is an area we might jointly invest in, right? What other barriers do you see for this population? I'd love to hear. Where should we start putting our creative energies? Yeah.
One of the things that we found is the financial literacy piece that's always missing from our first-gen low-income students. I mean, nobody teaches our parents how to budget, but they do it because of survival. So we started doing financial literacy workshops for parents, for students that were younger, realizing that if we higher chance of students can engage as well. So maybe some joint things. We also are doing things in coffee shops now. So we're doing FAFSA workshops at Starbucks. Well, my family doesn't go to Starbucks, but they go to Mi Tierra. So we're in Mi Tierra now. We're just kind of there to provide support.
Those are great ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
They start that when their kids are born, right? That's gonna put them on that path. At an even younger age.
I do think we have to be, I mean, I love that coffee shop idea, but and we have in our P20 Alliance, which is superintendents and higher ed, but we also have Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the Boys and Girls Club, Latinos in Action, University Neighborhood Partners, because we know that the trust in public institutions is waning, but community nonprofit trust is higher, and places, trusted relationships in your local community are much more likely to get your attention. So I think that's wise.
Question way over here and then back here. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll stand. So my name's Lauren. I'm a first gen Chicana. I'm also from Los Angeles también. And so one thing that I actually have a background in financial aid. I was a financial aid counselor before I moved here in academic advising. And one thing that we did is we worked at University of Laverne, and we would collaborate with admissions in trying to create workshops for students that were potentially coming here. And with admissions and financial aid, we would create these packets. Now, we are a bigger institution. We are a research institution. University of Laverne is a private institution. But we had the support in the team to create these workshops and these sessions to show students that if they completed their financial aid workshop, these are the potential scholarships and funding that they would get. And it would provide that comfortability and that knowledge for families that their child can attend this institution and be successful. And I think that is something that we can definitely collaborate together. Also, I think it's a great idea because also in California, we have a thing called the Board of Governors waiver, which I'm pretty sure you're aware of, where students that qualify, especially DACA students, can qualify for federal funding to get supported in completing their 2-year degree at a Salt Lake Community College, thus allowing students to kind of save up and going to a 4-year institution and completing the degree with less amount of debt. So I think this is completely possible here in the state of Utah.
Yeah, so I think that's something to note too, is that I was a transfer student from SLIC. So I did a year at SLIC, and I came here to the university to be a music education major. I ran into a lot of problems. The biggest one was, how the hell was I going to afford to be a student teacher? That is unacceptable that we ask that of students, that they have to work for free. Oftentimes, they have to put their life on hold if they have another job, they can't work. And then we talk about the shortage of educators. And a big point for me is that I left early. I actually haven't graduated. I work here full-time as staff, and I'm really happy about the job that I have. But I also, if I wanted to go back to school, I don't think I would go back for that, but I still have all this debt. So it's the effort of re-entry, even with someone who is really passionate about education and who really cares about teaching people and who really wants to be in front of students. How am I going to do that? And I'm not the only person that has to deal with this. I know of at least 10 people that have dropped out of the music ed program alone in the last 3 years. And it is just a difficult thing, especially for those of us that are very capable and are very passionate. But there is a barrier to entry, especially with transfer students who have had horrible things happen in their lives and have had this, unexpected circumstances. The pandemic's a great example. I dropped out right before the pandemic, but it really sure made it difficult to want to go back. And so I think that there is something to be said about, well, what about the students that don't have a really high GPA because they had a horrible, semester or 2 in a row? And how do we gain their trust back and really tell them, we want you here. We really want you here. And a lot of that comes down to money. We need to be investing money in students that aren't necessarily exceptional, but who have the potential to become exceptional.
I want your list, by the way. I want your list of barriers. Will you send that to me? Taylor.randall@utah.edu. All right, thank you.
That make a good point around that's the structure of higher ed that we've hung on to. Unpaid internship. That's ridiculous. We should just get rid of that language. Every internship, any assistantship, all of that should be paid. Otherwise, you are totally you're just pulling the cream of the crop. You're just you're reproducing social stratification. So all internships should be paid. We can find a donor to do that. I
All
bet.
right, let's
Yeah.
work on that one. There's one.
How much would you be giving to that program?
I think we have
Sorry, I
time,
wasn't asking you for money, but that's all right.
so we have time for like one more question. so
Sorry.
that President, yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
With respect to transfer from high school to the community college, for example, and then from the community college to the university, what role do you see faculty playing in that?
At the receiving institution or ours, or both?
In terms of attempting to encourage students to transfer to both places, essentially. Because I think the role of the faculty at the community college may be different than the role of the faculty at the university.
Yeah, and that
if you
probably
even see
deserves
the
an
role.
answer from each of us. We clearly have different types of faculty here that we ask to do kind of different sorts of things. We do, however, have faculty that are purely dedicated to teaching and making sure students do well. And I think in that sense, those are probably the faculty that are most ready to go and talk to students earlier. To me, my answer to the question is, the role is to pitch the vision of what they can be and their potential. And when I think about it that way, it's certainly, practically speaking, our teaching faculty, but I also want our research faculty doing that same thing, right? I want them occasionally out there saying, look, this is what I do. This is what you can do. This is what I train people to do. And the trick is to do that in a really, efficient way.
And I would just add to that by saying, at the community college level, so our teachers they do create undergraduate research opportunities, but they're not doing research like you all are. Our students are with faculty for the highest percentage of their time when they're with us. So our student services folks are great. I'm a student affairs person. That was my career. But it is not lost on me the role that faculty have in influencing students and being their mentor. And so I would say this, from the very, very beginning, when especially if you're in a gen ed or you're in a degree that is fairly transfer focused, is to, from the very get-go, be giving those students early feedback, academic confidence, telling them what they do well, telling them what they need to improve on. I've had more students tell me that the first time they really believed they could do college was when somebody finally gave them a paper back, circling a sentence and saying, this is a beautifully articulated point. They never thought they could write. So early feedback, giving them academic confidence, and then exactly what Taylor says, what will you do? How is this course relevant to what you're going to become and what you are passionate about? How does that course relate to that passion? Especially with this generation coming out of high school, they need relevance, and they will call BS if it's not. And so I think we have to translate for them to help them continue. And then talk about transfer scholarships and make sure they build going into resources into your syllabus and send them to, go find their academic advisor and give them 10 points for that or whatever, build it into the curriculum so that they start to see resources, use resources, and gain that confidence.
Yeah, free ice cream for anybody that fills out a FAFSA.
All right, so I think one of the challenges I heard from both of our presidents here is that we think about those barriers critically, intentionally. Certainly we have been, we'll continue to, and then I heard send some emails. So that'll be part of the conversation, no doubt, as it's ongoing. Join me, please, in thanking both of our presidents for taking some time. Sure.
I have to just say one more thing. August, Tanya would be really mad at me if I didn't give you this date, and Rachel. August 4th, thank you, Leilani. August 4th at the Herrera campus, that's the big open house day where there's going to be tours. We want you all there. We're going to have a great ribbon joining too, but that's a fun day. So put August 4th on your calendar.
Awesome. With that, Jason, yeah.
We're going to take 5 minutes to transition the students up. So, and then we're running a little bit late, but we'll get plenty of time with our student panel.
All right, thank you so much again for being here today. I have the pleasure to welcome and introduce our student panel here today, but welcome our narrator to discuss some questions that we have for our students. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Karen Paisley, the Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs and the Senior Associate Dean for Undergraduate Studies. Dr. Paisley graduated with her PhD in Clemson University and has been at the University of Utah for 23 years. She is tenured in the College of Health, and she has joined the Office of Undergraduate Studies just January of 2022. So please join us in welcoming Karen and our students.
Thank you all, and thanks for your patience as we get technical and other things figured out. With absolutely no offense to our presidents and administrators and other folks in the room, this is the best part, just so y'all know, the students. So these humans are remarkable. Their full bios are in the program, and I hope you take time to read them, and I hope you take time to chat with these folks over lunch and otherwise, because they're truly inspirational young folks. So thank y'all for your time. I'm just going to ask each of y'all real quick to just share your name, what pronouns you prefer to use, and what you're studying and where you are, which institution you're attending currently. So William.
Hello, hello. All right, good morning, good morning. Okay, you guys don't seem too excited to be here. Good morning, good morning. All right, guys, my name is William Stewart. I'm 23. I'm going to Slick right now, and then I'm going to go to entrepreneurship. So that's my pathway. I'm super excited to be here. So.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Atsiri Ciclali Regalado Juarez. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm currently studying honors psychology at the University of Utah with a minor in nutrition, but I just transferred from Slick last fall. So I graduated in summer, but I walked in May.
Perfect. Let's see. Oh, it works. So my name is Benjamin Lyman. I guess he, him. And yeah, transferred here in the fall of 2021. Seems like a long time ago. So, but yeah, still studying here at the University of Utah, just with about a year left. Yeah, look forward to it. It's gonna be fun.
Well, thank y'all very much. So William, I'm going to start with you. When did you know that you wanted to transfer to the University of Utah, and what did you do to get that process rolling?
Okay, so I feel like I was not as conventional. I joined the Army first, and then I had gotten out into the reserves. And so as a young 19-year-old does, traveling the country in an RV, he runs out of money. And the Army had promised me college, and that was not the process that I was promised. It was like going in a transfer, trying to figure it out. And so I had been in Utah, and I looked at the transfer page. That's the first thing you look at. It's like, hey, how do I transfer? You look at the transfer page, and it says, yeah, these are the requirements, but like, really, who do I talk to? It's a really daunting process, especially not knowing who to talk to. And when you call them, they give you kind of a generic answer until you eventually find out that you can go to the VA. So that was my process, and it was really daunting at first, but that's when I decided I wanted to go to the University of Utah, and the first step was going to Slick.
So when you were at Salt Lake Community College, who did you talk to about getting here? What did that process look like for you?
Right, so the first person I spoke to was Matt Butcher. He was the coordinator at the VA and a really great guy. And so they all helped me with my advising process, which I think maybe shouldn't have been the process, but the first step was talking to them and making sure that I knew what kind of things I wanted to do. I went to general studies to make sure that I could transfer. And that was like the first step, was talking to them.
I'm going to probe a little bit on a conversation that you and I had. When you first applied to the U, how'd that go for you?
Right. So my first application to the University of Utah, I had first went to CSN, got a couple of credits, and then tried to transfer. But I have no idea how an application goes. It just says apply, and like you fill out a bunch of documents, and then it asks you for your personal statement. When your personal statement is not really who you are, what you're trying to do, it's really just a prerequisite of requirements that someone's going to look at for 2 seconds and then stamp yes or no. So it was really daunting to have the first one be no, declined, denied, and then you look and you're like, okay, maybe why? You get this question. So what did they say? Why did you not get accepted? And you're like, well, I have no idea. No one told me that I was supposed to get a letter or anything to let me know what things I could improve upon in order to graduate or transfer. And then when I made a bunch of phone calls to try to figure out who I should be talking to, it didn't seem like any of the offices were in conjunction. I would talk to the transfer office at SLIC or the transfer office here or the admissions office, and they'd all give you a very standard and generic answer to a very specific scenario. So that was pretty daunting as well.
Y'all, we got to do better. I'm sorry. Like, thank you. Okay. So at City, think back to your last semester at Salt Lake Community College and you were going to come to the U, you'd been accepted. What were the kinds of things you were doing to prepare for that transition, or what steps were you taking in that semester before?
Well, that semester's still very fresh because that was last spring semester. So a year from today or from now, right? It's actually really funny because I didn't do much preparation. I was actually involved with the student association. So I was vice president of the clubs and organizations at Salt Lake Community College. And so we still had a bunch of events and a lot of things to do, right? And so the main person, my mentor, who was the one who told me to apply to the University of Utah, because I wanted to go to Utah State, but she sat me down in her office and was like, actually, I see a lot of potential in you at the U. You have a community up there and you need to be up there. And it was because of her that I applied to the University of Utah. And then she literally was pushing me all the time. She was the one who literally also sat me down to like fill out the application, because in my mind, I was like, no, like transferring is like, I can do that in like the summer. I can work on that in the summer. Like, I don't really want to leave. Actually, let me just like finish out like my duties here as like the student government, right? And so I didn't do much preparation. I did attend a couple workshops that the transfer center did have, but it was really my advisor, my mentor, who was like constantly pushing me, right, to fill out the application. And when I got accepted was a week after commencement. And I was in my office cleaning out my office, and I jumped onto my email and I ran to my advisor's office and I was like, I got accepted. But it was a lot of the preparation that I had was actually her work in connecting me to folks up here. So she introduced me to the First Gen Scholars. Now I'm a mentor at the First Gen Scholars. She introduced me to the Dream Center. I'm very connected with Salt Lake Community College Dream Center. And I still go back. I actually went back last month and also did a speech about like my experience and what I did there. So it was a lot about her connecting. So I think the key point is connections. And a student doesn't know what they don't know, right? So it's a little bit on y'all to really start talking about transferring as soon as possible. And I love what President Huffland said about during the first semester, if faculty, because students are so involved with faculty one-on-one in the classroom, if faculty start talking about transferring and start connecting you to folks up here or in other institutions that are working in your field that they want to go into, I think that would be like game changing for everyone.
Thank you for that. And Alfred, how's that for intrusiveness? Magic, right? Love it, love it. So William, you're still there and now you're going to come here. So what are you doing to prepare?
Right. So the first steps to actually figuring out how I was going to transfer, because I got denied at least 3 times before coming here. And I think that's a huge thing, to be denied 3 times and not know how you're going to get into this university and still being like, hey, I'm going to send it 100%. It was the major exposition, and I had seen Paul. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you. Big hand. Round of applause. He actually walked me through the entire application and kind of helped me. This go off? Okay. And it helped me write out my personal statement and actually get my application sent in. And that was the biggest thing, was actually feeling comfortable with my application and knowing that I was headed in the right direction, and having someone sit down with me and tell me like, hey, these are the things that they're looking for, and these are the things you need to put in. And so that was amazing. So thank you once again, Paul.
Incredible. And we knew that. Thank you, Paul, for everything. Hey, Benjamin, after you transferred to the U, what was the biggest change or surprise or set of surprises or set of changes during your first semester here?
I think just, let's see. Is this working? Yeah, perfect. I think just how big it is. I think I noticed the difference between college and university, because I attended South City, Redwood campus, and I kind of moved around. But once I got here, there's a lot of different buildings and spaces and all sorts of different different places to be. So I think that was kind of an adjustment, is trying to kind of get used to like a campus and what an actual campus looks like. It seemed like in terms of like my classes, Canvas, like everything was kind of still the same. Like I knew how to kind of do, day-to-day life, but just the whole environment was much different. And I've never been involved in terms of like at Salt Lake Community College. I wish I had done more to get involved, but I didn't. And it seems like once I got to the university, I actually did get kind of adjusted to getting involved, being active on campus and kind of being present to an actual student life. Yeah.
Can I jump on to that?
Yes.
I think for me, since I was very involved in Salt Lake Community College, coming into the University of Utah, I made the first week, I made a freshman friend, and I was like, you know what? I know that the institution has to have, let's say a resource, right? They have to have this. I just don't know where it's at here. I know where it's at Slick, right? So it's being a transfer student, it's like once you get acclimated to your community college, you know where things are. You know that there is a writing center. You know that there's this. You know that there's financial aid. There's all these offices and all these people you can reach out, and sometimes you have to. But once you transfer, you feel 10 steps behind because you know that there's resources out there. You just don't know where it's at here. And I think that's another huge thing that especially like faculty can kind of help transfer students with, because yeah, maybe we do know how to use Canvas, but it works a little bit different if, for example, getting grades tested. There's like this one app or one website that my math class used, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but okay, but yeah.
So to follow up on that a little bit at CD, what support services or individual people were the most helpful during that transition period?
Well, like I mentioned, it all started back at Slick. One, my mentor, her name is Christina Saruknarong. She works at the Thane Center in Student Life, and she was not my direct advisor, but she advised my peers. She was always in the office, and she would come to us and she would literally advise us on anything. If it's being first gen, obviously families plays a huge role, our grades and all of that. So she was huge, and the Thane Center for me, since I was super involved, was huge. The Dream Center at Salt Lake Community College, again, I'm super involved with them. Admissions as well. Here at the University of Utah, it was a lot of those connection buildings, right? The Dream Center connected me to the Dream Center here. The Thane Center connected me to the first gen folks, admissions, just a lot of connecting. But here, the resources I found here that were like super phenomenal in me getting acclimated and transitioning was the Dream Center, was the Student Life and, no, sorry, that's over there. The Center for CESP, can someone? There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Over there, it's ODMA. So very different. But again, what President Hufflin mentioned was that community building and those connections that transferred from SLIC to here were huge in me getting acclimated here. And if it wasn't for them, I believe the current manager for the Dream Center, Raquel, the first week of school, literally gave me and like 2 other students a tour and was like, here's the counseling center, here's admissions, here's the library, here's the writing center. And obviously it's not part of her job, but that was huge. Me and my other friends were able to get therapy and counseling through the counseling center because we were introduced to it early on in the year. And so it's all those connections that I think you don't have to look like your students, but understanding where your students come from, their background, and how they're different. That was another big thing that was presented at a conference I went for transfer students back in early February, that every transfer student is a unique story. And in order to help them and to know their needs, you need to understand and know know them as a person. It's not, we can't put them in a box and be like, oh, this is how you're going to do it, right? Just like the other freshmen, because we come from different backgrounds. different experiences. We do have college experience, but it looks different for each of us.
So Benjamin, you said that you hadn't necessarily been very connected at Salt Lake Community College, but you were here or you are here. How did you go about doing that? What were the experiences? What were your strategies? How did you make connections here that kind of made this place smaller than it seemed at the beginning?
That's a good way to say that. Let's see. One of the main thing, I mean, again, it's 2023. It feels like I transferred in 2021. Again, it feels like a lifetime ago. But one of the things, I guess, new student orientation, it was on Canvas. So I didn't actually show up, but one of the slides on Canvas was about the Crimson Transfer Honor Society. And it was just kind of put in there. And they mentioned their workshops and kind of how to get involved with the Crimson Transfer Honor Society. And as soon as I got admitted and came up to campus, that was kind of one of the first things I did, was kind of get involved with the Crimson Transfer Honor Society and Mr. Paul, and just kind of got connected there. And through that kind of just one slide on Canvas, it kind of opened up kind of the whole rest of my involvement on campus.
I want to follow up on a story that you shared with me when we chatted a little bit before this. You talked about a particular faculty member. And part of our conversation earlier today was what role can faculty play in these spaces? Would you be willing to share a bit of that story about Christy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that was actually one of the first meetings I had at one of the workshops, and Professor Christy Toth, I don't know if she's in here, but yeah, she kind of got me connected with the writing and rhetoric department. And we had study groups, we had meetings, we had just kind of everything to get involved. And the Linco building feels like that's been my home here on campus. Feels like that's kind of where everything's been situated. So yeah, Professor Christy Toth has been everything. Yeah.
And it seems like now you're minoring in writing and rhetoric studies, right?
Yep. Yes.
Turns out, just putting that
It
out there.
works.
It
worked
works.
out.
It works. I want to ask each of y'all to be really pointed with us. Okay, be really blunt. We can handle it. Most of us are grown-ups, or trying to be. I'd love for you to contemplate advice to faculty first. If you could tell faculty, please, whatever you do this, don't do this, or stop doing this, or do this better. What would you tell faculty from your lived experience and your perspective as a student?
So I don't know how much of this you guys control, right? I know each step of the way I had numbers that I could call that were on a website, right? So the first one would be the VA. The VA would then say, okay, there's a, Tuesdays with the U. Awesome, that's amazing. However, I do have important classes from 10 to 1:20 and it ends at 2 p.m. And if I'm at a different campus, which there are like 5, 6, 7, whoever knows how many campuses. And if I can't make it within that time, okay, I can't talk to someone new that's not on one of these platforms that are on a list. So what really does end up happening is I call a bunch of people, I tell them my scenario, my very specific scenario, and they give me a very generic answer saying, hey, make sure your GPA is within this range. Okay, cool, my GPA isn't within this range. Make sure you send in your application. All right, that's very, very helpful. Send in an application. Go ahead and talk to this person. Okay, you don't think I've tried to talk to this person 10, 7, 8 times, telling me the same thing? They give you the same names that I'm looking at, and there's not really like an outlet for a new person to speak to or someone that can actually help. A really big thing I would say is the offices don't seem like they're in conjunction at all, right? And I really hate to say that because it does suck to see like all your bright faces here in this room and for me to tell you it does not seem like you're communicating at all, right? So I think that'd be the biggest thing, is helping me find someone like Paul. Thank you again, Paul, that can actually sit down and talk with me through my scenario, because it doesn't seem like any advisor that I spoke to was able to say, okay, hey, you can talk to this person at the U. I know them personally. Here's my personal relationship with them. And here, let's get the ball rolling. Let's get this started. You know what I mean? It was more so, here, how about you talk to this person that everyone knows, and that isn't really helping. So, yeah.
What I also hear in there, and thank you for that, what I also hear in there is let's listen really carefully first and respond to individuals and not generic answers. Love that. Thank you. Atsiri, what would you tell faculty specifically? What should we do, not do, or do differently?
Okay. Can I just comment on one thing you said that I
for
think
it.
I love? Was that it really, again, we went through the pandemic and we went virtual and all these things, but I think it plays a huge impact. If you tell them, hey, come into my office or let's meet at a space, let's talk it through. If I can't help you with this, let me walk you, introduce you, and talk with the other person about your situation. And until you're in right hands, I will let you go and like let you continue your journey. Because again, that's fundamental. And it's through my different mentors and my different advisors that have done that, that have sent me, you know, through my journey and gotten me somewhere. So I love that you said that. For faculty in particular, I think stop assuming that everyone knows everything. Like, yes, we're college students, we're independent, we're adults, we get it. We need to be out there and doing our own thing. But sometimes with students, if you do not put it in front of their face, they will not worry about it because we have 10 homework assignments from, 4 classes and projects and whatnot to worry about to get our grade. That sometimes if we don't know, we don't know. And if it's not in front of us, we really just discard it, right? So stop assuming that we know. And I think particular for, again, transfer students, if you're in the classroom and let's say at Solid Community College, you had to make an appointment to go to the testing center and you had to take your test, right? Certain hours. Here, depending on your professor and depending on the course, you take it in the classroom. Sometimes you do go to the testing center, or I don't know actually, because I haven't had to go through that. And so as a transfer student, again, I don't know what I don't know. And I think professors and faculty need to stop assuming that, especially even freshmen as well. Like I would be in my math class and I'd turn around and I'd be like, hey, do you know like when and where we have to take the test? And they'd be like, no, I'm a freshman, I don't know anything. And I'm like, oh shoot, okay, well, I know we have a test coming up and we have to take it. I don't know if we have to take it here or somewhere else, right? So stop assuming that everyone knows what they're doing, because sometimes we don't. And again, we're adults, you don't have to be behind us, but giving us the resources like right in front of our faces is really helpful. With that being said, I think, again, putting those resources in front of us, if just putting it out there and not necessarily having the student, when it comes to being a student or transfer student, you do a lot of self-advocating, right? Of like, hey, again, I don't know what this is. I don't know where this is. Can you help me out? I think it would be super helpful because I do have friends who are super timid, super shy, and they are scared of the professors. I'm not, because again, I was involved with the student government. So I know that if you don't ask, you will not get anything, right? So you have to ask. But my friends who have been at the U for 3 years are so scared to go up to the professors and ask them like simple questions. And I'm like, no, but I think to help those students who are also not very self-advocating, putting just the resources, not just on the website or on the syllabus, but in class, like after class or before class. One thing that I also did as the student association over there is that we would go up to our professors when a big event was coming and we'd be like, hey, can I make an announcement? Most professors were like, yeah, go ahead. Like, we want students to be involved, to know what things are happening, right? And then we'd give like a short announcement as a student at the beginning of class or at the end of class of like, hey, there's something happening at the end of this month. If y'all can come join us, it's free, there's food, families included, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, just those things of like announcements, getting resources to students and mentioning it during class can help not just transfer students, but I think students in general.
Faculty do love to play hide the ball, don't we? We need to stop that. Benjamin, what would you want your faculty to do, not do, do differently, stop doing, start doing? What's that look like for you?
I think the main thing is just kind of, it sounds so generic, but like reach out. I've struggled and then I've not struggled, and I've been good and then I've been not so good. But all the ups and downs, it seems like almost every time, each semester, no matter what that looks like, the goods and the bads, I've always had a professor reach out and just say, hey, I just want to check in. I just want to see how you are. Like, you know, are you good? What's happening? You know, and they always ask, how can we help? And I think that's been the most important thing, is just kind of getting that help, just kind of making sure that somebody reaches out and I still feel connected to the class, to the semester, to where I am in my whole university life. Yeah, it seems just like, and it's a simple message, just on Canvas. So it's not even like an email or a text, just Canvas. Yeah, it's always helped. It's always been big.
Can I touch on something? I think a big part is that is like a lot of students won't reach out. Like the fact that we're sitting up here and you guys are able to see our faces and we're able to communicate with you is a huge step. That takes a lot of self-confidence. It takes a lot of will. And a lot of students don't have that. So like these 3 faces that you're seeing are the voices of thousands. And so you need to take that into account as well.
So there are lots of other folks that y'all interact with who aren't faculty. You've got staff and. I'm cursed, y'all, and I'm loud, so y'all know. We got faculty, thank you. You got faculty you interact with, and then you've got staff in all different kinds of offices, your academic advisors, those kinds of things. Contemplating that group of folks, what advice would you give them in terms of, please, 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 whatever you do, blank?
I got it spaced out. I'm gonna pass for just a second. Hold on.
Ooh, I don't have a don't, I have a do. Again, just being in spaces where students are and saying hi and starting a conversation with your students is huge. Again, at Slick, we were in the student center, right? In the student leadership center. And this one advisor, most of us are advisors, right? Like, I get it, we get it. I was a student staff, so I get it. There's a lot of work to be doing, right? But it really impacts the students when you come in, they're studying, right? You obviously don't want to bother them, but at the same time be like, hey, how are you? How's your day? What you working on, right? And building those connections and the students knowing, hey, like there's someone to listen, right? Again, this is so funny, but it was like phenomenal and super like just amazing. The experience I had with my mentor at Slick, we literally, she would come and we had this like space in our office. We called it the creative corner. And we would just, all the students would chill there. People would be coming in and out, studying or just chilling or eating. There's always food at our office because students always love food, right? And students would be chilling or doing homework or whatnot. And she would come and she'd be like, hey, y'all, how y'all doing? What y'all working on? And then slowly as the semester progressed, we started doing TED Talks with Tina on Tuesdays. So Tuesdays, after all her meetings were done, she would come into the creative corner. Whoever was there, she'd be like, okay, y'all, what do you have for me? And like, we would literally talk about anything. Sometimes we'd talk about like, hey, I'm struggling with my parents. I don't know what it means to be first gen. I don't know what to do, right? Again, it was through the creative corner. And that one day she sat me down. She was like, fill out the application for the U. You are going, you got this. Let's fill out the applications for other, but I really want to emphasize the U. And I was like, okay, cool. And just, you build that connection with students that a student, again, isn't timid enough, or they get rid of their timidness to come up to you and be like, hey, I'm struggling. And I was able to create those connections here at the U as well. Again, through the Center of Equity and Diversity here, CESB, I have 2 mentors. One of them is here, Martha Hernandez, and then yes, and Vanessa Ruelas. And last semester, like I mentioned, was my first semester, and it was a rough semester, not gonna lie, like being really blunt about it. And right now I'm only doing 1 credit hour because last semester was so rough, to the point where like physically I was struggling with my health. Because at Solid Community College, I was super involved, right? Student government, 13 credits, working part-time. I could do it. I did it. I graduated. I came here and I piled everything on myself, right? I was like 16 credit hours and student involvement and working and the commute time. I did not foresee the commute time, especially because I took the train last semester. And so it was all these things I piled onto myself that I was like, my health was struggling. On November 1st, I remember this because it was right after Halloween. That morning, I woke up super early and I was like, it's really weird because I'm not an early person. And I was in the kitchen and my mom handed me her phone and was like, hey, can you send an email to your sibling's teacher? And I was like, sure. All I remember was like grabbing her phone, I started typing, and next thing you know, I blacked out. When I finally recovered conscience, my mom was like trying to like hold me up, and she's like, oh my gosh, you fainted. And my dad was running from the room to get me. And that was November 1st. Well, the last 2 weeks of the semester, literally during finals, because obviously all the bad things have to happen when you most need to be okay. I was sick in bed for 3 days, literally in bed, and the world was spinning. And then those 2 weeks I was trying to recover, but my grades literally plummeted. And it was literally not my fault. I did pile on too much, but it was a learning lesson for me because I was like, oh yeah, university and community college, not the same. I learned it the hard way. So sorry, can you repeat the question? I like went off into this tangent.
Yeah, the question was just if you had a chance to tell staff, your advisor, other staff, like non-teaching folks of you that are so central to your support, please blank, which could be do, don't do, stop, do, anything, but please blank, what would be the request that you made of folks?
Okay, I remember where I was going with this story. Again, my grades plummeted, right? When I received an email at the end of last semester, early this semester, I got an email that I was on academic probation, and it was quite an emotional shock for me because I graduated from SLIC with a 3.8. I was on the dean's list. I was on the president's list. Academically, I have always been super academically driven, that bad grades were not a thing for me. And for my grade to go from a 3.8 to a 1.6, I was like, what in the world? What happened, right? And I literally started crying. I saw the email and I started crying. And the only thing I could do was think resources. And the only person I could remember to reach out at that time was Vanessa Reles, who works in the CESP Center. And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, I'm on academic probation. I don't know what to do. I need to figure this out. I'm not quitting, but I literally don't know what to do now. It was through her that I got connected to Martha, and now we're working on the retroactive withdrawal, which I would have never known existed. Didn't know that SLIC is supposed to have one too, and I think they do, but I did not know because I did not need it. But it was through those connections that students at their worst, at their lowest, are able to still reach out and ask for help. So building those connections, again, is huge. And it doesn't have to be like super personal, but the fact that you're open to saying hi to your students, reaching out to your students, makes a huge difference for them to come to you when they really, really, really do need the help.
Benjamin, what about you?
Perfect. Yeah, I feel like I can echo 99% of everything that was just 100% of everything that was just said. It's spot on. Communication, again, just reaching out. I guess I'm gonna kind of just nail one thing is this sounds so weird, but study groups. When I came up to the U and I got involved with the writing and rhetoric department, that was one of the resources, which is study groups. And I met people and I met familiar faces, and it was mostly over Zoom, and it's so easy to kind of just have, a blacked out screen and your name and that's it. But as the weeks went on, you start to turn on the camera, you start to kind of actually see other people and you make that connection. So study groups, I have one this semester that's helped bring me to a point of success for right now. We'll see. There's still a few weeks left in the semester. But a study group, again, this semester is it's helped me out. It's made a huge difference. So I guess just if professors have one, or any professors, any classes, just kind of it just feels like another connection. Yeah, study groups, classmates, professors, all that.
Okay, I do have a thing now. So as a sergeant, right, I have to take care of soldiers. Okay. That there's a chain of command, and whenever they have an issue and I can't solve it, I refer them to someone that's higher in the chain of command. What I do not do is have them talk to that person alone. I make that first phone call, and I walked into that office and I explain what has happened to the soldier, and I have the soldier intervene if there's something I said was wrong. Do not let a student go away from you without knowing that you have walked into the right door, right? My role as a sergeant is to make more sergeants, right? Your role as an educator or faculty is to make more graduates, If I fail to make more sergeants, I failed. If you fail to make less graduates, you failed. If you let that student walk away and they did not graduate from college, that is a failure. That is a deficiency right there. So I just wanted to make sure you guys are making that first phone call and making sure that you're helping them. That's the most daunting part, is that first phone call, feeling comfortable, feeling like you care. Make that first phone call with them. That's all I got.
And that's a lot. We love it. Y'all join me in thanking this incredible group of young people who have been very frank with us and very honest with us and very vulnerable with us. And that takes a lot of courage and a lot of character. I am grateful to know y'all, and this group is going to be too, as they get a chance to talk to you over lunch. So I am going to turn it back to Leilani, but let's thank these people. Thank you.
I was going to take that little mic, but yes, please, thank you guys. All right, so thank you all so much. I know that you are busy students and I appreciate your time and your being here today. All of us do. So thank you so much for your feedback that we can take away and actually move forward on, okay, take some action with. We have some gifts for you as you are ready to leave today. But please, everybody, again, if we could get a round of applause for these students and for Dr. Paisley. We're going to break for lunch, folks. Please know that lunch is set up and we'll be able to get going and start lunch. We're going to start eating and then we'll intervene and communicate some more with you at about 12:20.
We've officially transitioned to afternoon. Wonderful conversations that are ongoing. This is sort of the best part of our time together where we get to talk, network, say hi to old friends and hello, meet some new people. So I know we still have a number of people online, so we're going to welcome them back as well. We're running just a little bit late, so this session might go over by 5 to 10 minutes, but we're going to turn our time over to Chase Haygood and standing in for Rachel Lewis from Salt Lake Community College, who is at home and not feeling well today. So we wish her all the best. But Leilani Clegg from SLCC is gonna fill Rachel's shoes. And they're gonna spend a little bit of time with sharing some general updates from both of our institutional perspectives that we feel like folks should know about. And then they're just gonna offer a few comments and some reflections on what they heard today from our panelists and our presidents and our keynote. And then after that, we'll come back up and sort of transition to our last session. So I'll turn it over to Leilani and Chase. Thanks.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Oh, we've had lunch. So I will try to be as animated as well, not as much as I possibly could be, but somewhat animated to keep our interest. I'm going to offer a few comments, ask Leilani to do the same, and then sit and just chat and perhaps invite questions from you all as well and depend on Jason to make sure that we don't go too far over. Again, I'm Chase Haygood. I'm privileged to work at the University of Utah with some incredible people alongside some of the incredible students that you've heard from today. I want to thank everybody who's here in person, and I don't know if we're live streaming this portion or not. We are. Thank you for everybody who is joining us via live stream. I see colleagues who we've known for a while and colleagues who are working within the UC system as well. It's good to see many of you again. I want to take the opportunity while we've got a couple of folks, I think, still in the room, to thank food services folks at a very delicious lunch. So thank you for that. And certainly thank our friends here at the Eccles Alumni House for hosting this wonderful event. So I'm going to start and then I'm going to move quickly through a couple of comments. listening to our keynote, who I think I could sit and just listen to for as long as he would be willing to share insights and experiences over a career at UCLA. My prompt from Jason and team, from Paul, as well as Daniel, was to try to do our best, I think, to summarize some of the things or thread some things together. And one of the things I'd start with, and this, in some ways, when folks equate work relationships with family, it's one of my pet peeves. Because in some ways we're not family, but my mindset has shifted over the course of the morning in terms of where I think family can be applicable. Because as I sat and listened to Alfred and listened to both of our presidents, and to Karen's point, most importantly, our students, when we take a moment to sit and listen critically, here are a couple of words that I heard as and it started to sound more and more like family. Students especially talked about getting help. They talked about certainly connections. They talked about care. They talked about campus feeling like home. They even talked about food, which many of us know that that's a great motivational factor to get students in a room and to get them to share insights. And as I sat there, and certainly as I was seated here and listening to both of our presidents talk, it occurred to me that, in fact, maybe we should start thinking about Salt Lake Community College and the University of Utah as siblings inside one family, that we acknowledge that we can, even when we have some differences, that together it's our obligation and our privilege to make sure that students can be successful between our two institutions. I know that that is happening. I want to acknowledge it, but I think speaking and using that language in a different kind of way, or at least marking it, hopefully adds to that. It creates new energy in that space. One, because I think students are counting on us, and two, because I think, as I've come to know folks like Jason Pickavance and Leilani Clegg and Rachel Lewis and Clifton Sanders and Denise Huftelin, we have far more in common than we have in difference, or that separates us. And in the same way, I'd give a shout out to Alfred, just, no matter those differences, when we look for similarities from one first-gen kid of the working class to another, those similarities, I think, are what we rely on, particularly in what some might see as troubling days in the American Republic. So those are things I heard over the course of the morning so far. At the University of Utah, I think it is fair to say that we are deeply committed to access and to transfer student success with our greatest partner in that work, Salt Lake Community College. In undergraduate studies, again, a place that I'm privileged to serve as the dean of, we're focused on improving and ever enhancing exceptional educational experiences for every student at the University of Utah, and that certainly includes transfer students. I want to take a moment here, and I'm going to try to be very brief, to highlight some of the work and give some academic update for transfer students, the work surrounding transfer students that's currently happening at the U. We have formed, as many of you are aware, the Office of Transfer Student Success, which has its mission to improve the equitable transfer experiences and outcomes by providing leadership for and supporting the coordination of transfer activities and functions across campus. And so much of that work, I think, as Alfred pointed us to this morning, was through relationship, through connection, and through collaboration. It's a demonstration, we hope, of our institution's investment in transfer students and to our partnership with SLCC. Through this partnership, we've developed articulation agreements, as many of you know, transfer pathways, and the like, and deep, I think, meaningful, professional, and somewhat personal relationships with colleagues. We have achieved program level agreements between SLCC and the U to ensure course articulation and transfer to ensure students can smoothly transfer between programs at SLCC and the U. Transfer pathways offer student-facing academic plans that show which courses students might take at SLCC and how that path continues, not a new path, but a continuation of a path to the University of Utah. To date, we have 45 signed articulation agreements that have been developed over the past several years. And as we make our way through lunch, Jason, Leilani, and their teams are going to share more updates in that space, including plans to update some existing pathways and agreements, as well as what President Randall said. And Jason and I have been comparing notes along with Leilani, writing notes back and forth to each other as students, and as Alfred was giving keynote, to think through how is it, right, that we demolish some of those myths? How is it that we begin piloting, even as I like to think of it, as Harriman as a hyper transfer site? And how do we make that campus work unlike any other in American higher education? A few highlights more, and then I'm going to hand over to Leilani. We're excited about myriad opportunities there at the Juniper Building and that partnership available to students coming soon, in fact, next fall, and look forward to the chance to foster new partnerships with SLCC. On behalf of the University of Utah, I want to offer thanks to the many faculty and staff from both institutions who have worked diligently to prepare for the opening of the Harriman campus in August of 2023. We were in a meeting, an update meeting, an internal campus group here at the University of Utah, I think 2 days ago, if my memory serves. Days blur together. And it is a tremendous amount of work. The work is immense, and it is tremendous. To see a campus come alive. Not just one university or one institution's campus, but a campus and a building wherein two entities will coexist and cohabitate for student success. And I want to acknowledge that and thank everyone in the room and online and folks not present who have put much energy behind that, and patience as well. I want to encourage you all to take a look at harriman.utah.edu or read for the Utah folks, as well as our SLCC partners, and at the U article on the progress of the project. The U is coordinating with SLCC to establish academic programs in phases, beginning with social sciences, education, business, and the like. Harriman will also host the university's first Engage U site. Engage U will serve as a welcome, or at a leading edge, if you will, a resource hub for students as they make their way into the U from wherever. We know one of those sites will be SLCC for sure, or as they continue their educational path and their future path to the world of work. A second point I'd make is the Office for Transfer Student Success at the University of Utah is doing great things. You've heard many shout outs this morning to Paul directly from students. I'll echo that alongside Jason and Daniel and the work that is done, and the great things for transfer students here at the University of Utah, offering truly unique programming that is student-centered and again is based, I think, on a notion of care, that the institution deeply cares about transfer students and their success. It includes transition support programming with panel sessions, new transfer student welcome events, transfer workshop series. The Crimson Transfer Honor Society, which was mentioned by one of the students as well, is a really great connecting point. A university-wide supported student organization and honor society that recognizes and celebrates the academic excellence of transfer students and offers service-based opportunities and community for transfer students, supporting that transition and the success here at the U. Two more. Support for academic bridge programming beginning in the summer of 2023. Transfer Student Success is partnering with Professor Christy Toth in Writing and Rhetoric, the aforementioned by student as well. You begin to see the folks whose work expresses their values, which is a really, really great thing in a right for you at SLCC to bridge that program really well for students. We're interested in developing and scaling out the model, and more opportunities for transfer bridge programs forthcoming. Finally, Transfer Student Success is focused on assessing and improving, per Alfred's comments as well, existing transfer systems and processes across the transfer student experience, with several activities to date, like a Transfer Student Success Working Group, transfer.utah.edu, General Education Reimagined could get added to that list in terms of monitoring what we're doing and realizing the impact. And in that case, it is no mystery that our general education at the University of Utah was in fact negatively impacting transfer students. And I am very proud to say that a coalition was built among faculty, among staff and others to make serious revision, something that had not been done in 28 years at the University of Utah. to completely reimagine general education, and it will go into full effect in fall of 2024. Significant work in that space for sure. Credit mobility and articulation as well. Our admissions and registrar's office, I want to shout out to the work truly is about a whole campus. It is about building a transfer receptive campus. Admissions and registrar's office have recently implemented changes with transcript processing that make those processes themselves more inclusive, more efficient, with an all college level credit bearing courses from regionally accredited institutions transcripted and evaluated for credit, where credit is awarded for direct equivalencies. That new process began with transfer admits in the spring of 2023. And since that time, the registrar's office has sent about 7,600 new courses to be evaluated by academic departments and created over 6,200 equivalencies. That, I'll pause, is real work affecting real students' lives, where extra credit that they have paid for one way or another, or will pay for over the next 10, 20, or 30 years, has an immediate impact on their progression progression to degree completion. A big thanks to Emily Johnson and the team in the registrar's office for that work for transfer articulation. The Office of Undergraduate Studies is developing a new role as well that's going to support transferring courses and credits from other institutions to the U. The office will ensure that credits and requirements are appropriately accounted upon transfer and assist students through unique circumstances. Last point I want to make, and then I'm pitching. Karen's like, yeah, you said that. A lot of good and important work I want to highlight, so I appreciate your patience. Our colleagues in the Office of Admissions has a new assistant director for transfer recruitment, Daniel DeWitt. That in and of itself is significant and should signal to all of us and to prospective students that we value the place and space that transfer students have at this institution. Under his leadership, Admissions has recently developed a number of programs, many in partnership with SLCC, that are intended to improve transfer admission experiences and enhance connections between SLCC and the U. Those include things like Swoop to the U events held at SLCC and Tuesdays with the U at SLCC. Admissions also held its first ever Choose the U admitted transfer dinner this spring to support admitted transfer students, to provide additional resources and get students excited about their continued path that will now bring them to the University of Utah. I'll close with this. We have made really substantial, good progress over the last year, year and a half, in ensuring that every student at the University of Utah has an exceptional educational experience. Our work is not yet done. That's what keeps us here and keeps us excited. As has come up in a couple of meetings of late, it's important to note that even if the work is hard, we're not afraid of that hard work. Our partnership with SLCC has been a key component in achieving that success and the goal of providing the best educational outcomes for transfer students at the U. And I want to thank Leilani for her work, and our partners at SLCC, all of those folks, Jason, Clifton, all of the faculty and staff who are part of this partnership. With that, I'll hand over to my colleague and my friend, Leilani Clegg.
I wasn't going to come up here, but here I am. Aloha. That was kind of sad. So we're trying that one more time. Aloha. Much better, much better. I'm excited to be here today and to see so many faces from the University of Utah that we've had a chance to be engaged with over many different things, but transfer specifically. But very much want to give a shout out to all of my SLCC colleagues that are here. This transfer summit has evolved. And this is not, I haven't been a part of all of them. I wish I had been that person, but it was Rachel Lewis. So I want to make sure Rachel Lewis is recognized, and again, wish her well to feel well soon. She'll hear about this and owes me lunch for this, but I'll talk to her about that later. But I want to just put an emphasis around so much hard work has happened, and without Dr. Jason Taylor and Rachel Lewis really kicking things in gear, 4 years ago, right? From the fourth summit that we're at, to put articulation in a place where it needs to be, and to start to work collaboratively with our faculty, institution to institution. So important, the work that needs to be done. And I can't acknowledge enough again, our academic advising team at Salt Lake Community College, as well as, of course, our faculty. And without you and without your review of the things that you work on so well, and the teaching that you give to our students, and helping them prepare for this path and their pathway here, it's not possible without you. So thank you for that work. That being said, as we've transitioned through this whole preparing for this event today, looking at the things that we needed to do in order to have a focus around articulation and a focus around what work in transfer is being done. Again, I would echo and give accolades to the University of Utah and the great stride that you've taken in this past year alone. The previous year was fun to get involved and work with Daniel DeWitt and the admissions team and really come up with some creative ideas and ways to outreach to our Salt Lake Community College students and to engage in spaces that maybe weren't always engaged in. At our Dream Center, I know one of our students shared a little bit about that, but what a beautiful resource, and the opportunity to be there when it opened and to watch butterflies take off and to understand really the true meaning of bringing community together and serving those students that don't have a voice, right? And having them be at that place, but also have a connection to this place. Just in that one act alone, bringing the two institutions together kind of sparked the interest in my mind. At the time, I was in admissions for Salt Lake Community College, but I still sat going, wow, there's a lot of really cool transfer work that could be done. There's a lot of great opportunities that can happen. And so my own position evolved as of many things, but that was one. But in that note, I'm saying this because the steps that the University of Utah has taken in this last year to provide a student successful track for transition and transfer is one that we will need to step in line with, and one that we will need to work together more. Right now, the word communication was resonating with me before today, but more so through today, and the gaps that we have. A lot of those gaps exist within our own walls. So how do we fix that? What steps need to be taken to make sure that we are doing this again for sole purpose of our students? And every year I'm thinking, first thing I want to write down is our student panel needs to be a little longer, right? Our keynote needs to be a little longer. Everything needs a little bit more time. Just because I think we're almost at the cusp of hearing some things that are very critical. And we did, and I love that our students shared things today with us that we can take away and actually productively take steps to make things better. But at the same time, we in an institution at the Salt Lake Community College have a lot of work to do this next year. We have a lot of new, refreshing things that are happening around campuses. Everyone keeps talking about the campuses. We have a lot of them. But with that, we have a new center that's joining with the University of Utah in Herrera. And I'm a Herrera resident, so I can tell you how exciting it's been to drive past and check it out and what's going on now, right? But just to see that blooming out of the nothing and now becoming something that we can all cheer on as it continues to grow and develop, and we partner in with bringing students that are around that area. There are 3 high schools alone that are large high schools right there. There are 2 large academic schools there that are charter schools. And then we kind of encroach a little bit, maybe quietly share that into the UVU space where Saratoga Springs and some of those schools they're right there too. They're 15 minutes away. So we have a really great responsibility in reaching out to that community and really engaging in what we haven't done yet well. And what we haven't done yet well is communicate and make sure that keeping our students first and foremost is what we need to focus on And as faculty have heard today, like a repeated thread of Canvas is nice, right? Canvas works. There's some stuff on Canvas that a student can find, but what better resource than you that they get to hear from, that they're learning from, for you to say, and where you're going to transfer to. That was the greatest thing I heard today. I was like, wow, that's cool. That's impactful. And what a responsibility we have to continue in that step. And so next year, as Salt Lake Community College hosts this event, there are a lot of things to live up to because this was fantastic. And I've got to, Daniel, you're standing. Thank you for standing. For perfect timing. Without Daniel, our event today would not have gone as well. So thank you so much for the hard work and what you put into this. But we hope to have a great event next year. I hope that next year what it looks like is not Transfer Articulation Summit that it's been in the past, but more of a Transfer Student Success Summit. I'd love to steal the words and steal the title and actually have it be that, because holistically our students are motivated to do something, but they don't know the words. They don't know what to ask. They don't know what they don't know. I'm using your words, but they don't know what they don't know. So it is our responsibility as a collective, as a whole, to make sure that we provide that resource, that we are that person that takes that time to stop, to find out why that student is standing around outside the building going, right? That look, we all know that look. We've all seen that face. We see it likely every day. Take the time to stop. Who cares if you're 5 minutes late for that meeting you're headed to? If it's going to help that student get to the place they need to be, if it's going to help that student make a contact with anybody that they know they can reach out to so that they can connect them to the pals, so they can connect them to their resources, then by all means, take that 5 minutes, right? Take the extra time. I, again, appreciate so much the opportunity to be here and to share the space with you today and to discuss this most important work that's being done, and look so forward to next year and engaging with our student affairs community at large, with student affairs at Salt Lake Community College, actually bridging a gap that we've had for a little while there, making it something that can really focus on the students. So again, thank you, and I'll sit with you now. Okay.
I was going to ask you to stay standing, Leilani. Yeah, just because. I feel like we in undergrad, we're wrapping up, so I'm not going to say more than 2 sentences here. But I think one thing that has changed in undergraduate studies with Chase's leadership is this philosophy of students first, and it just the whole day for me, and from what Alfred said, and presidents and the student panel, and hearing from you too, it's just students first. And I think that sort of guiding philosophy just reframes how I think we can operate in a very complex, between 2 different institutions in a complex context. So I know that was more than 2 sentences, but thank you all for coming. For those, I think some folks are still online, and we're gonna end Zoom. And for those of you who are staying for the next session, it's really, I think we'll advance the slide here. Oh, there was our slide for the 5th annual summit, which will be at Harriman in a lovely event center that hosts, I think that has capacity for 150 people, and we're going to fill it. So thank you all. Those of you who are staying to talk about articulation, so mostly sort of the faculty or academic leaders and academic advisors who are part of that conversation, stick around. We've got some table tents. We're going to organize you by discipline, and we won't keep you till 2 p.m. we promise. But the rest of you, thank you for coming, and thank you all for your shared commitment to this work. Yeah.